Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Pika Fiction. Get comfortable because today's story is what if Latias followed Ash home to Pallet Town and used her human form to become his wife. If you find joy in these stories, please like, share, and subscribe. Your engagement keeps this channel alive. Without wasting any time, let's start. Chapter 1, The Quiet Monarch. The air in Pallet Town had a weight to it, a comfortable, familiar pressure like a well-worn blanket. It was the scent of damp earth after a sun shower, the distant hum of the Pidgey flock that nested in the eaves of Professor Oak's lab, and the taste of salt carried on the breeze from the sea just beyond the rolling green hills. For most, it was the smell of home. For Ash Ketchum, it had become the sound of silence. He stood in the middle of the field behind his house, a space worn into a perfect circle of packed dirt from years of ceaseless battle. Across from him, Pikachu's tail twitched, a yellow lightning rod drawing power from the clear blue sky. The air crackled, not with tension, but with the low thrum of contained energy. They weren't training for a tournament. There were no more tournaments left for him to win. This was something else. A ritual. A question without an answer. "All right, buddy," Ash said, his voice a low murmur that carried easily in the quiet. He was 22 now, the lanky, boundless energy of his youth settled into a lean, corded strength. The sharp angles of his face had softened, but his eyes, a warm and familiar brown, held a new depth, a stillness that hadn't been there before. He was the World Monarch, a title that felt both impossibly grand and strangely hollow. "Let's go. Full speed. Pattern Delta." Pikachu didn't need the verbal command. His body was already a blur of motion before the last word left Ash's lips. He shot forward, not with a simple quick attack, but with a fluid, weaving pattern that left faint afterimages in the air. He was a golden comet, hugging the ground. "Now," Ash commanded. Pikachu's trajectory broke. He pivoted on one foot, the movement impossibly sharp, and a crackling sphere of electricity, an electro ball, shot not at Ash, but at a point 10 feet to his left. It was a feint, a move designed to draw an opponent's eye. Ash didn't even flinch. He was already moving, his body turning, anticipating the real attack. As the electro ball hit the dirt and dissipated, Pikachu used the recoil to launch himself into the air, spinning like a top. A shimmering, blade-like arc of steel-hard energy formed around his tail. Iron Tail. It came down like a guillotine. Ash's hand shot up. It was a simple gesture, a flat palm held out towards the descending attack. Most trainers would have commanded a counter. Ash didn't need to. A bond forged over a decade of shared struggle, of victories and crushing defeats, was faster than any verbal order. An instant before the iron tail connected, a bolt of lightning, a thunderbolt of breathtaking precision, erupted from Pikachu's cheeks. It wasn't aimed at Ash. It struck the iron tail itself. The collision was magnificent. The thunderbolt wrapped around the steel-coated tail, supercharging the attack. The air screamed as the energized blade sliced downwards, its power multiplied tenfold. It struck the ground an inch from Ash's feet. It didn't explode. The energy was so perfectly focused, so masterfully controlled, that it carved a clean, cauterized line into the earth, 6 feet long and smoking with ozone. The display of power was absolute, yet the control was so complete it was almost silent. There was no wasted energy, no collateral damage. Just a perfect, devastating strike delivered exactly where intended. Pikachu landed softly, his red cheeks sparking. Ash lowered his hand, a small, weary smile touching his lips. "Good. The timing is getting better." Pikachu's ears drooped slightly. He could feel it, too. The restlessness in his partner, the quiet hum of a great engine with nowhere to drive. The world had thrown everything it had at them. They had faced down gods, stared into the abyss, and fought their way to the very pinnacle of the Pokémon battling world. He had defeated Leon. The Galar Stadium had roared his name, a wave of sound so immense it had felt like a physical force. For a week, he had been swept up in parades, interviews, and ceremonies. He was the monarch, the strongest trainer in the world. Then he had come home. And the world had gone quiet. His friends had their own lives. Brock was a renowned Pokémon doctor, his dream realized. Misty was a world-class gym leader, a master of her craft, traveling to international competitions. Gary was a leading researcher, his name already spoken with the same respect as his grandfather's. They were all moving forward, their paths stretching out before them. His path had led to a summit, and he was standing on it, alone, with nothing but the view. "You hungry?" Ash asked, reaching down to scratch Pikachu behind the ears. "Cha," Pikachu leaned into the touch, a familiar comfort in a world that felt increasingly strange. Ash walked back towards the house, the sun warm on his shoulders. He could feel the weight of his own legend settling on him. People in town treated him differently now. There was an awe, a distance. The kids who used to challenge him to a battle now just asked for his autograph, their eyes wide. He was no longer just Ash from Pallet Town, he was a monument. His mother, Delia, was in the kitchen, humming a cheerful tune as she prepared lunch. The scent of her cooking was the one thing that hadn't changed, a constant anchor in his life. "Just in time," she said, her smile as bright as ever. "You and Pikachu must be starving. You were working so hard." She didn't need to see the training to know. She could feel the vibrations in the very bones of the house. "Always," Ash said, forcing a grin as he sat at the small wooden table. Pikachu hopped onto his customary chair, and Delia placed a small bowl of Pokémon food and a miniature bottle of ketchup in front of him. "Something wrong, honey?" Delia asked, placing a plate of sandwiches in front of him. Her perception was as sharp as any psychic's. She saw the weariness that clung to him, the shadow behind his monarch's smile. "Just thinking," Ash said, picking up a sandwich. "About what?" she prompted gently, sitting opposite him. He chewed for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "It's just, for so long, the goal was clear. Get stronger. Beat the next gym leader. Win the next league. Become the best." He looked out the window, at the familiar green hill. "I did it. I'm here." And now, he trailed off, unable to articulate the feeling. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't disappointment. It was a profound sense of drift. "And now you get to decide what the best really means," Delia said softly. "Maybe it's not a title, Ash. Maybe it's something you do." He looked at her, and for a moment, the monarch was gone, and he was just her son again. "What if I don't know what that is?" "You'll find it," she said with unshakable certainty. "Or maybe," she added, a twinkle in her eye, "it will find you." Later that afternoon, seeking to escape the quiet of his own mind, Ash took a walk through town. Pallet was unchanging, a town preserved in amber. The same neat houses with their picket fences, the same flower boxes bursting with color. He nodded to Mr. Mime, who was diligently sweeping the front porch, earning a cheerful, pantomimed wave in return. He was heading towards the path that led to Professor Oak's lab when he saw her. She was standing by the town's central well, her back to him, looking at the way the light dappled through the leaves of the large oak tree that shaded the square. She was slender, dressed in a simple white and red dress that seemed to shimmer faintly in the sunlight. Her hair was a warm auburn, tied back loosely. There was a stillness about her, an effortless grace that made her stand out from the rustic simplicity of the town. She didn't belong here, yet she looked as if she had been born from the scenery itself. As if sensing his gaze, she turned. And Ash's breath caught in his throat. It was her eyes. Large and expressive, they were a startling, luminous gold, the color of a sunset over the ocean. But it wasn't just the color. It was the feeling they evoked in him. A sudden, dizzying sense of familiarity, a powerful jolt of an emotion he couldn't name. It was like hearing a half-forgotten melody from his childhood, a song tied to a dream of soaring through the clouds. He knew those eyes. She offered him a small, shy smile. "Hello." Her voice was soft, melodic, with a strange, resonant quality, like wind chimes heard from a great distance. "Hi," Ash managed, feeling oddly flustered. He, the World Monarch, who had stood down rampaging deities and addressed stadiums of thousands, was suddenly at a loss for words in front of a single, mysterious woman. "Are you, new in town? I don't think I've seen you before." "In a way," she said, her gaze holding his. There was a profound intelligence in her look, an ancient knowing that seemed at odds with her youthful appearance. "I was just passing through. My name is Bianca." The name. Bianca. It hit him with another jolt. Alto Mare. The Soul Du. The girl with the artist's beret who never spoke. The other one, the one who had kissed him goodbye. The one who was. He shook his head, clearing it. That was a lifetime ago. A childhood adventure. It couldn't be. This was just a coincidence. A strange, powerful coincidence. "I'm Ash," he said, extending a hand. She took it. Her skin was cool and smooth, and as their fingers touched, a faint, pleasant warmth spread up his arm, a feeling like stepping into the first rays of morning sun. It chased away a fraction of the weariness that had settled deep in his bones. "I know," she said simply, her golden eyes full of an unreadable emotion. Before he could ask what she meant, a low, guttural roar echoed from the direction of the hills, powerful enough to rattle the windows of the nearby houses. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. It was followed by a tremor that ran through the ground, a deep, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. People began to shout. A woman screamed, pointing towards the path leading to Professor Oak's lab. "It's a Pokémon. It's huge. It's destroying everything." Ash's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. The quiet, contemplative man vanished, replaced by the monarch. His eyes hardened, his posture straightened. He was a weapon being drawn from its sheath. "Stay here," he said to Bianca, his voice now a firm command. "Get inside somewhere safe." He didn't wait for a reply. He broke into a sprint, Pikachu a yellow streak at his heels, a familiar fire now burning in his chest. This, at least, was a problem he understood. He crested the hill and saw it. A Tyranitar, massive and ancient, its dark green, armor-plated hide scarred from 100 battles. It wasn't just big, it was a walking mountain of fury. It swung its head, its powerful jaws snapping, and a hyper beam tore through the air, vaporizing a section of fence around the lab's corral. The other Pokémon were panicking, stampeding in terror. But Ash saw something else. The Tyranitar's movements were erratic, clumsy. Its eyes were wide with not just rage, but terror. It was flinching at shadows, roaring at the empty sky. It wasn't attacking. It was lashing out blindly, trapped in a nightmare. As he got closer, he could feel it. A faint, discordant hum in the air, a psychic static that grated on the nerves and made the hairs on his arms stand up. It was subtle, but it was there. A feeling of pure, gnawing anxiety, weaponized and projected. The Tyranitar, with its primal, powerful mind, was being driven mad by it. Professor Oak and his assistants were trying to evacuate the Pokémon from the nearby pens, their faces pale with fear. "Ash! Thank goodness," the professor cried out, ducking as the Tyranitar's tail swept overhead, smashing a water trough to pieces. "It just appeared. It's not responding to anything. It's in pain, Professor." Ash shouted over the din, "Something is messing with its head." He didn't have time to explain further. The Tyranitar had spotted him, its red-rimmed eyes locking onto the new threat. It let out another earth-shaking roar and charged. The ground shuddered with each footfall. This was not a stadium battle. This was raw, untamed power that could level the entire town. "Pikachu, run interference. Pattern Gamma." Ash commanded. Pikachu shot forward, a tiny David against a gargantuan Goliath. He didn't attack. He ran in a wide, sweeping arc, his speed a golden blur. The Tyranitar, its mind clouded, tried to follow, its immense bulk making it slow to turn. Now, left flank. Quick attack into the ground. Pikachu pivoted, slamming into the earth at the Tyranitar's feet. It wasn't an attack meant to do damage. It was a destabilizing blow. A cloud of dirt and rock exploded upwards, right into the charging behemoth's face. Blinded and disoriented, the Tyranitar stumbled, its forward momentum broken. It roared in frustration and unleashed a stone edge. Jagged, glowing pillars of rock erupted from the ground, chasing after the tiny mouse Pokémon. Jump and spin. Use the pillars. Pikachu leaped onto the first rising stone, then to the second, and the third, using their upward momentum to gain incredible height. He was a master of his environment, turning the attack against his opponent. From the apex of his jump, he could see the Tyranitar shaking its head, trying to clear the dust from its eyes. It's losing focus. Pikachu, now. Get its attention, but don't hurt it. Ash's mind was working at lightning speed. This wasn't about winning. It was about de-escalation. It was about saving the terrified creature from itself. He ran forward, closing the distance while the Tyranitar was distracted. Hey! Over here, he yelled, waving his arms. It was a reckless, insane move, but it was calculated. He needed its focus on him, and only him. The Tyranitar's head snapped towards him, its eyes burning with feverish intensity. It forgot Pikachu. It forgot everything but the small human standing defiantly before it. It opened its cavernous mouth, and the telltale sphere of destructive energy began to form for another hyper beam. From the edge of the town square, Bianca watched, her heart pounding. The other townsfolk had fled or were hiding, but she stood rooted to the spot, her hands clasped tightly. She could feel the psychic discord far more acutely than Ash could. It was a cruel, scratching sound in her mind, a frequency of pure dread. She felt the Tyranitar's terror as if it were her own. But what held her transfixed was Ash. He wasn't the boy she remembered from Alto Mare, the one who had charged in with raw courage and a lot of luck. This was a commander. A king. He moved with an absolute certainty, his voice a calm, clear instrument of command amidst the chaos. He wasn't fighting the Tyranitar. He was dancing with it, guiding its rage, redirecting its power, his bond with his Pokémon so complete it was like watching a single being with two bodies. She saw the compassion in his stance, the desperate need to save rather than defeat. And a wave of profound, overwhelming love washed over her, so powerful it almost brought her to her knees. This was the man he had become. The hyper beam was about to fire. Point-blank range. It would be inescapable. Pikachu, full power. Aim for the sky. Now. Ash roared. From his perch high above, Pikachu unleashed his full might. It wasn't a controlled bolt. It was a raw, magnificent storm of electrical fury, a column of pure lightning that shot straight up into the heavens, turning the blue sky a brilliant, blinding white for a split second. The flash, the deafening crack of thunder, the sudden, overwhelming sensory input, it was the ultimate pattern interrupt. The Tyranitar flinched violently, its head jerking upwards towards the impossible sun that had just ignited above it. The hyper beam, its aim thrown off, fired harmlessly into the sky, a searing beam of destruction that dissipated into the upper atmosphere. The backlash from firing such a powerful move and the sensory shock was too much for its tormented mind. The Tyranitar's legs buckled. It staggered, its massive body swaying, and then it crashed to the ground with a boom that shook the whole of Pallet town. Its eyes fluttered, the red haze of fury finally receding, replaced by sheer exhaustion. It was over. Silence descended, broken only by the distant, panicked chirping of birds and the heavy breathing of the fallen giant. Professor Oak and the others emerged slowly from their places of cover, their faces a mixture of terror and utter disbelief. They stared at the downed Tyranitar, then at Ash, who stood calmly just a few yards away, his hands on his hips. Pikachu dropped from the sky, landing lightly on his shoulder, nuzzling his cheek. "Incredible," Professor Oak whispered, adjusting his glasses. "Ash, my boy, you didn't even attack it directly. You outthought it." Ash walked over to the Tyranitar, placing a hand gently on its armored snout. The Pokémon flinched, but didn't have the strength to move. Its breathing was ragged. "It'll be okay, Professor. It just needs to rest. But we need to find out what caused this. I've never felt anything like that psychic interference before." As medics and lab assistants began to carefully approach the Tyranitar, Ash felt the adrenaline begin to drain away, leaving a familiar hollowness in its wake. He had solved the problem. He had saved the day. And now, the quiet was returning. He walked away from the controlled chaos, needing a moment alone. He found himself on the path back towards town, the setting sun casting long shadows across the ground. The lingering psychic static had faded, but a different kind of tension remained coiled in his shoulders, a product of the monarch's constant vigilance. He stopped, leaning against a tree, and closed his eyes. Pikachu chirped with concern, nudging his ear. "I'm okay, buddy. Just tired." "You are more than tired." The voice was soft, right beside him. He opened his eyes. Bianca was there. She had approached so silently he hadn't heard a thing. She looked from him to the scene of devastation on the hill, then back to his face. Her golden eyes held a universe of understanding. "That was," she began, then stopped, searching for the word. "You were incredible." "I just did what I had to do," he said, the words feeling inadequate. "No," she said, her voice firm but gentle. She stepped closer. Most trainers would have tried to overpower it. They would have met its rage with more rage. You saw its pain. You chose to heal, not to conquer. He had no response to that. She saw it. She understood. She lifted a hand, hesitating for a moment before placing it gently on his arm, over the fabric of his jacket. The moment her skin made contact, it happened. It was not a jolt, not a shock. It was a wave. A wave of pure, unblemished serenity. It flowed from her fingertips, through his arm, and into the very core of his being. It was the feeling of a cool stream washing over a fevered brow, the sound of a lullaby quieting a racing heart. The coiled tension in his muscles, the weary static in his mind, the hollow ache of his strange loneliness, it all dissolved, washed away by a tide of impossible peace. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding for months. He stared at her, his eyes wide with wonder. "What, how did you do that?" She simply smiled, a sad, sweet expression, and slowly withdrew her hand. The peace remained. "You carry a great deal of weight," she said, not as an observation, but as a statement of fact. Sometimes even a monarch needs a moment of quiet. They stood there in the fading light, the silence between them no longer empty, but filled with a profound, unspoken connection. Ash looked at her, at the impossible girl with the familiar eyes and the secret, healing touch, and he thought of what his mother had said. Maybe it will find you. He trusted his Pokémon. He trusted his instincts. They had never led him astray. And every instinct in his body was screaming at him that this person, this mystery named Bianca, was important. That she was the answer to a question he hadn't even known how to ask. "You said you were just passing through," he said, his voice steady again, clear. She nodded. "I was." "You don't have to," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A decision. "My house is just over there. We have a spare room. You could stay. For a while. If you want." Bianca's smile deepened, and this time, it reached her eyes, making them glow like twin suns. For the first time since he had met her, she looked not like an ancient, knowing spirit, but like a girl who had just been given the one thing she wanted most in the world. "I would like that very much, Ash," she said. As they walked back towards the warm lights of his home, Pikachu chattering happily from his shoulder, Ash felt a sense of rightness, of a new path beginning to form under his feet. Later that night, long after Bianca had been shown to the guest room and the house had fallen into a true, restful silence, Ash found himself in the living room. He couldn't sleep. He wasn't restless anymore, he was energized, alive with a feeling he hadn't felt in years. He switched on the small television, keeping the volume low. A news anchor was reporting on the day's events. And initial reports from Pallet town confirmed the rampaging Tyranitar has been subdued without injury, thanks to the decisive action of World Monarch Ash Ketchum. The screen cut to a different story. A serious-looking reporter stood in front of a sleek, corporate-looking building. In related news, sources confirmed that the Aegis Foundation has expanded its operations in the Kanto region. A spokesperson for the private global security firm stated they are deploying new, state-of-the-art sensory grids to help predict and stabilize regional anomalies, like the one that may have caused today's disturbance. The Foundation claims this technology will be crucial in preventing future incidents involving powerful or legendary Pokémon, ensuring global security in an increasingly unstable world. Ash watched, a thoughtful frown on his face. Aegis Foundation. He'd heard the name before. They were controversial, known for their aggressive, heavy-handed tactics. But stabilizing anomalies, that psychic static he'd felt, could they be connected? He switched off the television, the screen fading to black. The house was quiet. But for the first time in a long time, Ash Ketchum didn't feel alone in it. Upstairs, a woman who felt more like a dream than a person was sleeping under his roof. Outside, a faceless organization was spreading its web. The world, it seemed, was not done with him yet. And as he headed to his own bed, a genuine, hopeful smile touched his lips. The silence was finally over. Chapter 2, The Ian's Secret. The morning sun slanted through the kitchen window, painting stripes of warm gold across the wooden floor. The air was thick with the scent of brewing coffee and frying bacon, a comforting domesticity that felt both brand new and centuries old. Bianca sat at the small table, a mug cradled in her hands, watching Delia Ketchum move about her kitchen with an easy, practiced rhythm. She had been in this house for 3 days, and it was the safest she had felt in her entire existence. It was a strange and wonderful thing, this human life. She was learning its textures, its rhythms. The simple pleasure of a hot drink in the morning, the weight of a blanket at night, the way laughter could bubble up from your chest without conscious thought. She had observed humanity for eons, a distant, curious spectator. To be immersed in it, to feel the fabric of a dress against her skin and the solid earth beneath her feet, was an experience so dense and rich it was almost overwhelming. "More coffee, dear?" Delia asked, her voice pulling Bianca from her reverie. Bianca blinked, her golden eyes focusing. "Oh, no, thank you, Mrs. Ketchum. This is perfect." "Please, call me Delia," she said with that radiant smile, the one so like her son's. "Any friend of Ash's is family here." Bianca felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the coffee. She had watched Ash's mother from afar during his journeys, a beacon of unwavering love and support. To be the recipient of that warmth firsthand was a profound gift. She watched as Delia paused, reaching for the spice rack. Bianca knew, with a certainty that was as natural to her as breathing, what she was looking for. "It's just behind the jar of paprika," Bianca said softly. "The little green tin of herbs." Delia stopped, her hand hovering. She looked behind the paprika jar and, sure enough, there was the small green tin, tucked away out of sight. She pulled it out, a bewildered smile on her face. "Well, I'll be. I thought I'd lost that. How on earth did you know?" Bianca's own smile was shy. "Just a lucky guess." It wasn't a guess. She had felt Delia's flicker of frustration, the mental image of the tin, the vague memory of having put it somewhere unusual. It was a constant stream of information, the emotions and surface thoughts of those around her, a gentle tide she had learned to navigate. With Ash, it was different. His mind was not a tide but an ocean, deep and powerful, and when she was near him, it was all she could do not to be swept away in its currents. Ash entered the kitchen then, still rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Pikachu was perched on his shoulder, already wide awake and sniffing the air expectantly. Ash's presence changed the room's atmosphere, charging it with a quiet, potent energy. He saw Bianca and a slow smile spread across his face, a genuine, unguarded expression that made her heart do a strange, fluttering little dance. "Morning," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Morning," she replied, the word feeling inadequate to convey the sudden joy she felt. He moved to the coffee pot, and without thinking, she rose and took a mug from the cupboard. She placed it on the counter, pushing the sugar bowl and a small pitcher of milk next to it. He liked 2 sugars and just a splash of milk, enough to turn the coffee the color of worn leather. Ash paused, mug in hand, and looked at her. "How did you know that?" She felt a faint blush rise in her cheeks, a curious human reaction she was still getting used to. I just remembered from yesterday." He held her gaze for a long moment, a thoughtful, curious light in his eyes. He didn't press. He just nodded slowly and prepared his coffee exactly as she had laid it out. The unspoken questions hung in the air between them, but they weren't heavy or accusatory. They were a sign of his attention, his quiet observation. He was trying to understand her, and that was a courtesy few had ever afforded her true self. Later that morning, after Delia had left to run errands in town, a comfortable quiet settled over the house. Ash was cleaning his collection of badges, polishing the well-worn metal with a soft cloth. Bianca sat on the sofa, ostensibly reading a book from Professor Oak's library, but her attention was on him. She watched the careful, deliberate way he handled the small tokens of his past, each one a story, a struggle, a victory. "That's the Boulder badge, isn't it?" she asked, pointing to the simple gray octagon in his palm. "From your first gym battle." Ash looked up, surprised she recognized it. "Yeah. Brock's. It feels like a lifetime ago." He looked down at the badge, a nostalgic smile on his face. "I didn't really win it." "Not really. I had him on the ropes, but the gym sprinklers went off and weakened his onyx. I was so mad about winning that way that I left. He caught up to me later and gave it to me anyway. Said I showed him what it meant to care for your Pokémon." He fell silent, lost in the memory. Bianca felt the echo of it from him, the fierce pride of the boy he was, his righteous indignation, the surprise and gratitude he'd felt at Brock's gesture. She wasn't just hearing the story, she was feeling it. "You have come a long way from that boy," she said softly. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Have I?" "The man I saw on the hill a few days ago," she said, meeting his gaze without flinching, "knew that strength isn't the only way to win. That boy was just beginning to learn that lesson. The man I see now lives by it." The intensity of her perception seemed to startle him. He put the badge down, the faint clink of metal on wood echoing in the quiet room. "You see a lot, don't you, Bianca?" "It's hard not to," she confessed. An idea seemed to strike him then. A way to bridge the gap, to share something of himself in return. "Hey," he said, his tone shifting, becoming lighter. "I'm getting tired of being cooped up in here. Do you want to go for a walk? I can show you Viridian Forest. The real one, not just the path that cuts through it." Her heart leaped. A walk. Alone with him. I would love that. The air in Viridian Forest was cool and green, filtered through a thick canopy of ancient trees. It was a place of deep shadows and sudden, brilliant shafts of sunlight. The smell was of moss and damp earth and the sweet perfume of unseen blossoms. For Ash, it was like walking through a chapter of his own autobiography. "This is where I saw a Pidgey for the first time," he said, pointing to a low-hanging branch. "And over there is where I tried to catch a cater pie and ended up getting a face full of string shot." He walked with a confident, easy stride, his feet finding the pathless ground as if he had been born to it. Pikachu scampered ahead, his senses on high alert, his tail twitching as he investigated every rustle in the undergrowth. Bianca followed, her own senses overwhelmed. The forest was alive, a symphony of life she could feel in the very air. She could sense the slow, deep thoughts of the ancient trees, the skittish fear of a hidden Rattata, the territorial anger of a beedrill buzzing high overhead. It was a familiar language, one she had been denied while trapped in the muted sensory world of a human town. As they walked, Ash shared more stories. He spoke of his first encounter with Team Rocket, his chaotic battle with the samurai in the woods, the feeling of seeing a flock of Spearow defending their leader. He wasn't bragging. He was recounting his history, his origins, with a kind of fond, self-deprecating humor. He was showing her who he was before the world had named him Monarch. He was showing her Ash. In return, she offered pieces of her own story, veiled in allegory. "Where I come from," she said, her voice soft as they paused in a sun-dappled clearing, "there is an island. A city of water. It is very old, and very beautiful." Ash listened intently, his head tilted. "What's it like?" "It is protected by 2 guardians," she continued, her golden eyes distant, looking at a memory only she could see. "A brother and a sister. They are 2 halves of a single soul. They can fly through the city unseen, their only duty to protect the city and the great treasure at its heart." "The soul do," Ash whispered, the name coming to him unbidden. Bianca's eyes snapped to his, wide with surprise. "How?" "I've heard stories," he said quickly, covering his slip. The memories of Alto Mare were so vivid, so dreamlike, he sometimes wasn't sure what was real and what he had imagined. "A legend about a city called Alto Mare." A sad smile touched her lips. "Yes. A legend." She could feel his mind brushing against the memory, a jumble of images, a speeding water chariot, a girl in a white beret, a kiss on the cheek, a heroic sacrifice. He knew. He just didn't know that he knew. They continued on, a comfortable silence falling between them. They came to a stream, wide and babbling, the water crystal clear over smooth stones. A small swarm of beedrill were hovering aggressively over a patch of flowering bushes on the far side, their buzzing a low, angry thrum. "We should probably go around," Ash said, instinctively placing himself slightly in front of Bianca. "They can be nasty if they feel threatened." Bianca looked at the swarm. She could feel their collective anxiety, a territorial imperative driven by instinct. She held out a hand, not physically, but psychically. She didn't project a command or a threat. She sent out a feeling. A gentle, soothing wave of pure contentment. The feeling of a full belly and a safe hive. The angry buzzing lessened, softening to a low hum. The beedrill's aggressive hovering pattern slowed, becoming a lazy, drifting dance. One of them, the leader, turned its large, compound eyes towards her. It hovered for a moment, then dipped its head in a motion that was almost a bow before leading the swarm higher up into the canopy, away from the path. The entire exchange took less than 10 seconds. Ash stared, his mouth slightly agape. He had seen Pokémon trainers with a strong affinity for a certain type, but this was something else entirely. She hadn't said a word. She hadn't made a move. She had simply willed them to be calm. "How?" he asked, his voice full of undisguised awe. "They weren't angry," Bianca said, trying to sound casual, though her heart was hammering. She had shown too much. "They were just scared. They needed to know we weren't a threat." He looked from the now empty space where the beedrill had been, back to her. The pieces were falling into place in his mind, forming a picture that was both impossible and undeniably true. The healing touch. The precognitive knowledge of things in his own home. The ability to soothe a territorial swarm with a glance. The eyes, those unforgettable, soul-deep eyes. Before he could voice the thought, before he could say the name that was on the tip of his tongue, the idyllic peace of the forest was shattered. A shimmering, transparent wall of energy erupted from the trees to their left, crackling with a low hum. Simultaneously, another appeared to their right. They were being boxed in. Pikachu! Ash yelled, his body instantly shifting into a battle-ready stance. From the trees ahead, 3 figures dropped to the ground, moving with a silent, disciplined efficiency. They were clad in matte black tactical gear, their faces obscured by helmets with dark visors. On their shoulders was a stark white emblem, a stylized shield enclosing a sword. The Aegis Foundation. Ash Ketchum, one of the soldiers said, his voice distorted and metallic through his helmet speaker. You are interfering with a sanctioned containment operation. Stand down. Containment of what? Ash shot back, his eyes scanning, assessing. There's nothing here but wild Pokémon. As if on cue, a distortion appeared in the air near the stream. The air shimmered and warped as if seen through intense heat, and a small, green, fairy-like creature with large blue eyes and gossamer wings faded into view. Shelebi. It looked panicked, its eyes darting between the Aegis soldiers and the crackling energy walls. It had been hiding, using its time-altering abilities to remain unseen, and these soldiers had somehow flushed it out. Target is visible, another soldier reported into his comms. Mythical class entity, designation Shelebi. Begin Stage 2 containment. 2 of the soldiers raised complex-looking rifles. They weren't weapons of destruction. They were containment devices. You're not touching it, Ash snarled, the protective instinct that had defined his entire life flaring to life. Pikachu, use agility, break their line. Pikachu became a golden blur, ricocheting off a tree trunk and shooting between 2 of the soldiers. One of them grunted in surprise, stumbling as the small Pokémon zipped past his feet. Target is mobile and hostile, the leader barked. Deploy suppressors. The soldiers adjusted their tactics instantly. They weren't clumsy grunts. They were a trained, cohesive unit. One fired his rifle, not at Pikachu, but at the ground in front of him. A canister shot out and exploded in a spray of thick, white foam that expanded and hardened on contact. Pikachu, moving at incredible speed, had to pivot sharply to avoid being encased. They're trying to box you in, buddy. Use the trees. Ash commanded, his mind racing. These weren't Pokémon trainers. Their tactics were different, alien. He had to adapt. Thunderbolt, aim for the branches above them. A bolt of lightning shot upwards, not at the soldiers, but into the thick canopy. A heavy branch, scorched and weakened, cracked and fell, forcing the soldiers to scatter. The move was a testament to Ash's strategic evolution, he was using the environment as a weapon. While they were distracted, Ash ran towards Shelebi. Get out of here, he yelled at the terrified Pokémon. Go. Shelebi let out a frightened cry, but before it could warp time to escape, the 3rd soldier fired. A high-frequency sonic pulse erupted from his weapon, and Shelebi cried out in pain, clutching its head as it dropped to the ground, disoriented. Don't you hurt it? Ash roared, his anger boiling over. Pikachu, Iron Tail on that weapon. Pikachu, recovering his footing, launched himself through the air, his tail glowing with a metallic sheen. He flew like a silver missile towards the soldier with the sonic device. But the Aegis squad was ready. The leader stepped in front of his comrade, raising a portable, semi-translucent shield. Pikachu's iron tail slammed into it with a deafening clang. The shield flared with energy, absorbing the kinetic force and throwing Pikachu back. Bianca watched in horror. Ash and Pikachu were fighting with incredible skill, but they were outmatched by technology specifically designed to neutralize powers far beyond their own. She felt Shelebi's pain as a sharp spike in her own mind. She felt Ash's rising frustration and fierce, protective rage. They were going to lose. They were going to fail. Ash would be captured, and Shalebi would be taken. Target reacquired, the leader said calmly, the sonic weapon powering up again. Primary threat neutralized. Prepare the nullifier net for the mythical. The soldier who had blocked Pikachu's attack unslung a large, complicated launcher from his back. The device hummed, a sinister, multi-layered sound. The front of it glowed with a sickly, purple-white light. This was their trump card. Ash, get back. Bianca screamed, her voice tight with a fear she hadn't felt in centuries. She knew what that device was. It didn't just capture. It severed a being from its own energy, its very essence. For a being like her, or like Shalebi, it would be a fate worse than death. A living prison of static and silence. I'm not leaving it. Ash yelled back, placing himself between the soldiers and the downed Shalebi. It was a stupid, reckless, heroic gesture. It was completely, utterly Ash. Fire, the Aegis leader commanded. The nullifier net shot from the launcher. It wasn't a physical net of rope or wire. It was a projected field of shimmering, predatory energy that expanded as it flew, crackling as it tore through the air. It was fast. Too fast. It was going to hit both of them. In that fraction of a second, Bianca made a choice. Her human life, this precious, fragile gift, was secondary. Her secret was secondary. Ash was not. The world seemed to slow down. Ash was turning, his eyes wide, realizing he couldn't dodge it. Pikachu was still recovering, too far away to help. The net was feet away, its energy causing the very air to warp around it. Bianca moved. She wasn't running. She simply was. One moment she was by the stream. The next, she was in front of Ash, her back to him, her arms spread wide. She didn't move with human speed. She moved like a thought, a wish. A blur of white and red that left a faint trail of light in the air. The nullifier net struck her. But it didn't capture her. She passed through it. For a breathtaking instant, her form flickered, her human disguise unable to hold against the intense energy field designed to disrupt it. The Aegis soldiers saw a flash of something impossible, a silhouette of feathered wings, a longer neck, a form that was both draconic and angelic. The net passed harmlessly through her, its energy field sputtering as it tried and failed to lock onto her paradoxical nature, and slammed into a tree behind them, shorting out with a shower of sparks. Silence. The three soldiers stood frozen, their weapons half lowered, trying to process what they had just seen. Ash was right behind her, his hand on her shoulder, his mind reeling. Bianca, you went right through it. She didn't turn around. She couldn't. The soldiers were starting to recover from their shock, their training kicking in. They were raising their weapons again, their aim shifting from Shalebi to her. She was the new primary threat. The unknown. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and unfamiliar. It was over. The beautiful, simple dream was over. He would see her now. He would know what she was. And he would be afraid. Or worse, he would see her as just another monster to be studied or controlled. I'm sorry, Ash, she whispered, her voice choked with a grief so profound it felt like it would tear her human form apart. She closed her eyes and let go. It was not an explosion. It was an unfolding. A soft, brilliant light enveloped her, a light the color of a dawn sky. Her human form dissolved, not like smoke, but like a statue of pure light melting into its constituent parts. The light elongated, softened, sprouted wings of ethereal feathers. Her limbs reformed, her face lengthened into a gentle, aerodynamic shape. Her auburn hair became a red, V-shaped crest, and her golden human eyes became the same luminous, intelligent, and soul-piercing eyes of the Aeon Pokémon. She hovered a foot off the ground, a being of grace and immense, ancient power. The transformation was silent, but in Ash's mind, a voice bloomed, a voice he had only heard in dreams, clear as a silver bell. Ash. I'm sorry. It was Latias. The Aegis soldiers took a collective step back, their professional calm utterly shattered. Their sensors were screaming, reporting energy levels that were off the charts, readings that didn't conform to any known biological or physical laws. Shalebi, forgotten and recovered, took its chance. With a final, grateful look at Latias, it vanished in a swirl of shimmering green light, gone from this time. But Ash didn't see it leave. He wasn't looking at the soldiers. He was looking at her. At Latias. And he wasn't afraid. He wasn't shocked. He was relieved. The pieces didn't just click into place. They sang. The girl from Alto Mare with the beret who was Bianca. The other girl, the one who wasn't Bianca, the one who was Latias, who had shown him the soul dew, who had saved his life, who had kissed him goodbye. The name. The eyes. The calming touch. The ability to speak to Pokemon without words. The way she had phased through the net. It all made a perfect, beautiful sense. The Aegis leader, his voice shaking for the first time, gave the order. Fall back. I repeat, fall back. We are not equipped for this class of entity. The soldiers didn't need to be told twice. They turned and fled, their discipline breaking in the face of a true, undeniable legend made manifest. In moments, they were gone. The forest was quiet again, the only sound the gentle babble of the stream and the faint, humming glow that emanated from Latias. She floated there, her head bowed, her wings drooping, waiting for his fear, his anger, his rejection. She felt more vulnerable now, in her true and powerful form, than she ever had as a human. He took a step forward. And another. He walked right up to her, his expression not one of awe or fear, but of profound, gentle understanding. He stopped in front of her, close enough to feel the warmth of the light she gave off. Slowly, he reached out his hand, just as he had done with the rampaging Tyranitar. But this was not a gesture to calm a beast. It was a gesture of welcome. He gently cupped her cheek, his thumb stroking the smooth, feathered surface. She looked up at him, tears shimmering like liquid light at the corners of her draconic eyes. Ash broke into a slow, brilliant smile, the one that had always reached his eyes, the one that had captivated her from across the world. I knew it was you, he said. Chapter 3, The Aegis Gambit. The forest was silent in the aftermath. The lingering hum of Aegis technology had faded, replaced by the natural thrum of life returning to its rhythm. Latias remained hovering before Ash, her form a breathtaking sculpture of light and grace, her mind a maelstrom of fear and hope. She had braced herself for the schism, the moment he would see her not as Bianca, but as a creature, a power, an it. Instead, he had met the most terrifying truth of her existence with 3 simple words that had completely undone her. I knew it was you. His hand was still on her cheek, a warm, solid anchor in the swirling chaos of her emotions. His touch was not that of a tamer to a beast, or a researcher to a specimen. It was the touch of a man to the person he knew, the person he cared for. You're not afraid. Her voice in his mind was small, fragile, a stark contrast to the divine power she embodied. Afraid? Ash let out a short, incredulous laugh. He lowered his hand, his gaze sweeping over her, taking in the sweep of her wings, the intelligent light in her eyes. Latias, I've been chased by a stampede of toros, stared down a Giratina in the distortion world, and had lunch with a talking Meowth. You're the least scary thing I've seen all week. He paused, his expression softening into something deeper, more serious. I'm not afraid. I'm just glad you're okay. Pikachu, who had been watching the entire exchange with wide, curious eyes from a nearby rock, now scurried over. He ran right up to Latias and nuzzled against her side, letting out a soft, welcoming cha. He had known, too. He had smelled the familiar scent of Alto Mare on Bianca from the moment she arrived, a scent of sea salt and something ancient and otherworldly. Latias felt a fresh wave of emotion, this time not of fear, but of overwhelming relief. It was so potent it made her form flicker. With a soft shimmer of light, she allowed her human guise to reassert itself. She stood before him once more as Bianca, her clothes and form perfectly reconstituted, though her face was pale and her golden eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I was so scared," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I thought you would hate me. Or that you'd," she couldn't finish the thought. "That he would see her as a prize, a tool, a legendary to be captured." "Hey," Ash said, stepping closer. He looked down at her, his presence solid and reassuring. "Look at me. Did you really think that would matter to me? After everything?" He gestured vaguely, a motion that encompassed their shared, unspoken history in Alto Mare, the past few days in Pallet Town, the battle they had just survived. "You saved me. You saved Shalebi. You." He reached out and brushed a stray tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Latias, Bianca, whatever you want to be called. It doesn't matter. It's still you." His unconditional, immediate acceptance was a bomb on a wound she hadn't even known she carried. It was the core of him, the thing she had seen from afar and had been drawn to across continents and years. His fundamental decency. His unwavering loyalty. "Bianca," she said, her voice firmer now. "When I'm like this, I am Bianca." "All right, Bianca," he said, his smile returning. "Then let's get you home." They walked back to Pallet Town in a new kind of silence. It was no longer a silence of unspoken questions, but of shared truth. The secret was out, and instead of breaking them apart, it had forged a bond of solid adamantium between them. For Ash, the world suddenly felt sharper, brighter. The mystery of Bianca was solved, revealing a truth far more incredible than he could have imagined. He wasn't just hosting a mysterious woman, he was living with a legend. A friend he had thought lost to a dreamlike memory had returned. But the world does not allow such truths to remain quiet for long. The Aegis Foundation did not operate on luck, it operated on data. The squad in Viridian Forest had fallen back, but their helmet cams, their biometric sensors, and the drone that had been circling at high altitude had recorded everything. The impossible phasing through the nullifier net. The brilliant, silent transformation. The irrefutable energy signature of a top-tier legendary Pokémon. And most damningly, the World Monarch's gentle, accepting reaction. In a sterile, white command center deep underground, miles from any known city, Kalen watched the footage on a holographic display. The screen replayed the moment of Latias's transformation in slow motion, the light unfolding like a blossoming flower. His face, sharp and intelligent, was a mask of cold fury. Energy readings confirmed, an analyst reported from a nearby console, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's an Eon class, Latias. Previously documented in the Alto Mare incident a decade ago. Believed to be extinct or in seclusion." "Not in seclusion," Kalen murmured, his eyes locked on the image of Ash reaching out to touch Latias's cheek. "In collusion." He steepled his fingers, his mind a razor-sharp instrument of strategy. He knew. The monarch knew he was harboring it. "He lied to my men. He obstructed a sanctioned operation. He is actively consorting with an unregulated, uncontained mythical class entity." "Sir," another aide spoke up, a woman with a severe haircut and a tablet in her hand. "What are your orders?" "A direct assault on Pallet Town is politically problematic. Ketchum is not just a trainer, he's a global icon. And icons can be tarnished," Kalen said, his voice dangerously soft. "Direct assault is clumsy. It makes us the villains. We don't need to be villains when we have the truth on our side." He turned away from the hologram, his gaze sweeping over the command center, a hive of disciplined activity. "We are the Aegis Foundation. Our mandate is to protect humanity from the chaos these creatures represent. The World Monarch has just declared himself an agent of that chaos. So, we will use his own world against him." He began to pace, his voice crisp and clear, issuing a rapid-fire series of commands. Leith, I want you to package the intel. Everything. The Tyranitar incident, frame it as the legendary's unstable psychic aura agitating local Pokémon. The forest encounter, edit the footage to emphasize Ketchum's aggression and the creature's power. Leak it to our contacts at GNN and the Hoenn Chronicle. I want a narrative. The Monarch is unstable, his judgment clouded by a dangerous attachment. Yes, sir. Mara, get on the political channels. I want you to schedule off-the-record briefings with the Pokémon League Committee. Use the footage. Show them the Monarch is consorting with a power that could level a city. Emphasize the risk, the recklessness. Plant the seed of doubt. Is this man truly fit to represent us? Understood, sir. And a third front, Kalen continued, a grim smile touching his lips. The public. They love him. They see him as a hero. So we won't attack the hero. We'll challenge him. We will pressure the league to sanction a public exhibition match. A test of his continued fitness to hold the title. It will be his word against a league-sanctioned challenger. And we, he finished, his eyes gleaming with cold triumph, will be equipping that challenger. The campaign began subtly. A headline on a news site, questions mount over Pallet Town, disturbance, Monarch's involvement scrutinized. A talking head on a late-night show, sources say Ash Ketchum's behavior has been increasingly erratic since his coronation. Is the pressure too much? At first, Ash and Bianca barely noticed. They were too wrapped up in their new reality. They spent hours talking, truly talking. She told him of her long, lonely existence after her brother's sacrifice, of watching him from afar, of the ache of seeing a world he was in but she could not be. She described the immense effort it took to form a stable human body, a feat of psychic power that had taken her years to master, all for the slim hope of seeing him again. He, in turn, opened up about the emptiness he'd felt after winning the tournament, the feeling of reaching the end of the road. It felt like the story was over, he confessed one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the fireflies begin their nightly dance. And I didn't know what to do with just silence. My world has been nothing but silence for a very long time, she replied, her voice a soft murmur in the twilight. Your voice was the only sound in it. The public narrative, however, was growing louder. The story broke on the Galar News Network first, a primetime exclusive featuring edited, dramatic footage from the Aegis helmet cams. It showed Pikachu's thunderbolt striking the trees, making it look like an unprovoked, reckless attack. It showed Ash standing defiantly in front of the Aegis soldiers. And then, the centerpiece, the brilliant, terrifying flash of Latias' transformation, framed not as a revelation, but as an unveiling of a terrible secret. The phone started ringing. It was Professor Oak first, his voice tight with concern. Ash, what is this? The League is in an uproar. They're talking about an emergency session. Then it was his mother, calling from the market in Viridian City, her voice trembling. Ash, people are staring. They're whispering. They're saying you're keeping a monster. The final, and perhaps most painful, call came from a familiar, arrogant voice that had long since mellowed into grudging respect. Ashy boy, Gary Oak said, his tone lacking its usual bravado. You've really stepped in it this time. Ash was standing in the living room, the television on, showing a panel of experts gravely discussing the Ketchum situation. Bianca was standing by the window, her back to him, her shoulders rigid. Gary, Ash said, his voice flat. If you're calling to tell me I messed up, get in line. Don't be an idiot, Gary snapped, his voice sharp with a scientist's impatience for emotional drama. I'm not calling to lecture you. I'm calling to warn you. Gramps is getting calls from League officials. They're talking about invoking charter bylaws, about challenging your title. This Aegis Foundation has them running scared. They're painting your friend as a psychic time bomb and you as the fool holding the detonator. Ash glanced at Bianca's tense form. He could feel waves of hurt and fear radiating from her. They were turning her into a monster in the eyes of the world. "What do they want, Gary?" Ash asked, his voice hardening, the monarch's authority beginning to surface. There was a sigh on the other end of the line. "They want to put you on trial, essentially. But they can't. You're the monarch. You're untouchable, legally. So they're opting for the next best thing, a trial by combat. They're going to issue a formal challenge. A high-stakes exhibition match on the Indigo Plateau. You, versus a trainer of their choosing. If you win, you reaffirm your position. If you lose, I'll be seen as unfit." Ash finished, the pieces of Kaylin's strategy clicking into place. "They'll have the public mandate to force me to give her up." "Exactly," Gary confirmed. "It's a political gambit, Ash. A checkmate in 3 moves. And you're walking right into it." Ash looked at Bianca, at the way the setting sun caught the auburn strands of her hair. He remembered her terror in the forest, her willingness to sacrifice her dream just to protect him. He thought of her quiet strength, her gentle heart. And a cold, diamond-hard resolve formed in his own heart. They wanted a show. He'd give them one. "Let them," Ash said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. "Let them issue their challenge. We'll be there." "Ash, be smart about this," Gary protested. "You don't know who they'll pick. They'll have Aegis tech, counters for everything. They're setting you up to fail. They think this is about a Pokemon battle," Ash said, his eyes fixed on Bianca. "It isn't. This is about showing them they're wrong. About all of it." He hung up the phone. The room was silent. Bianca slowly turned from the window, her golden eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You don't have to do this, Ash. I can leave. I can go back into hiding. It would be safer for you." He walked over to her, closing the distance between them until he was standing directly in front of her. He took both of her hands in his. They were trembling. "Safer is not the same as right," he said, his voice low and intense. "I spent my whole life running around, trying to prove I was the best. I thought winning the tournament was the point. I was wrong." He squeezed her hands gently. "This is the point. Standing here, with you, against all of them. I'm not hiding you. I'm not ashamed. I won't let them turn you into something you're not. But they will hurt you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Your reputation, your title, everything you worked for." "It's just a title," he said with a conviction that stunned her. "It's just a crown. It's worthless if I have to sacrifice the people I care about to keep it." He looked her directly in the eye, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not giving you up, Bianca. Not now. Not ever. We're going to face them. Together." The day of the exhibition match arrived under a sky the color of slate. The Indigo Plateau Stadium, a place of so many of Ash's triumphs and failures, felt different today. The air was not festive, it was thick with tension, with the feeling of a public execution. The stands were packed, a sea of silent, watching faces. In the waiting room, a sterile concrete box, Ash adjusted the fit of his familiar blue jacket. He felt a strange calm. All the political maneuvering, the media frenzy, it had all been distilled down to this. A battle. Something he understood. Bianca stood with him, dressed in a simple white dress. She looked pale but resolute. She had offered to stay behind, to transform and hide, but he had refused. "No," he had told her. "You're standing on that field with me. If they're going to judge us, they're going to do it while looking us both in the eye." The door slid open, and a league official with a grim face looked in. 5 minutes, Monarch." Ash nodded. He turned to Bianca. He could feel her fear, a low, anxious thrum beneath the surface. He reached out and took her hand. "You ready for this?" She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. Her fear was still there, but something else was rising to meet it, his strength. His unwavering belief in them. With you? Always. They walked out into the stadium, and a wave of sound, a confused murmur of whispers and shouts, washed over them. They didn't walk to the trainer's box. They walked to the very center of the field, hand in hand, and stood there, exposed and defiant. Pikachu was on Ash's shoulder, his cheeks sparking with contained energy. On the far side of the field, his opponent emerged. He was a tall, severe-looking man Ash didn't recognize. He was dressed in the official League Challenger's uniform, but his belt was adorned with several sleek, metallic devices that were clearly not standard issue. One of them, a flat, circular disc, was already emitting a low, almost subsonic hum. Bianca flinched, a flicker of pain crossing her face. Ash, the noise, she whispered. It's like static. It makes it hard to focus. A sonic emitter. Designed to disrupt psychic abilities. Ash's jaw tightened. So that was their game. They weren't just trying to beat him. They were trying to torture her. The referee drone floated to the center of the field. This will be a 3-on-3 exhibition battle between the challenger, Nolan, and the reigning World Monarch, Ash Ketchum. Let the battle begin. Nolan smirked, his confidence absolute. He was a competent trainer, but his real strength lay in the technology Aegis had provided. You're a fool, Ketchum. That thing you're protecting should be in a lab, not on a battlefield. I'm going to show the world why. Go, Metagross. He threw his Pokeball, and the massive, psychic/steel Pokemon emerged with a heavy thud, its metallic body gleaming under the stadium lights. Ash met his gaze, his expression unreadable. A Metagross. Good choice. Strong, smart, but predictable. He didn't reach for a Pokeball. He simply looked at Bianca. It's your call. Who do you think? Bianca's eyes widened. He was asking her. Including her in the strategy. The sonic hum was a persistent irritation, a needle pressing into her mind, but Ash's trust was a shield against it. She looked at the Metagross, its powerful, calculating mind a dull throb against the static. She felt its immense physical power, its psychic potential dampened by its own steel nature. They needed speed. And fire. Infernape, she said, her voice clear and certain. He's fast enough to get inside its range, and his fire will burn through its defenses. Ash grinned. I was thinking the same thing. He grabbed a Pokeball from his belt. Infernape, I choose you. The firefighting monkey Pokemon erupted from the ball with a ferocious battle cry, flames blazing from his head. He landed in a low crouch, his eyes burning with intensity. A fire type against a psychic/steel. A bold but foolish choice, Nolan sneered. Metagross, use psychic. Metagross's red eye glowed, and a wave of psychic energy shot across the field. But the sonic emitter was doing its job. The attack was visibly distorted, weaker than it should have been. Infernape, dodge it. Use Flare Blitz. Ash commanded. Infernape shot forward, a literal fireball, easily sidestepping the weakened psychic blast. He slammed into Metagross, and the stadium was filled with the sound of a screeching, metallic impact. Metagross grunted, sliding back several feet, its steel hide smoking. Nolan's smirk faltered for a second. Meteor Mash. Metagross's 4 arms glowed, and it charged, its movement surprisingly fast for its size. He's baiting you. Bianca said urgently, her hand tightening on Ash's. He wants you to meet it head-on. She could feel the tactic forming in the challenger's mind, draw Infernape in, then trap him. Got it. Ash called back. Infernape, don't engage. Dig. Now. Just as Metagross was about to connect, Infernape dove into the ground, vanishing beneath the battlefield. Metagross's attack hit empty air, and it stumbled, overcommitted. Now! Ash roared. Infernape erupted from the ground directly beneath Metagross, delivering a titanic uppercut that lifted the half-ton Pokémon a foot into the air. Finish it. Close combat. Infernape became a blur of fists and feet, delivering a devastating flurry of blows to the airborne Metagross. The final kick sent the steel behemoth crashing to the ground. It didn't get up. A stunned silence fell over the stadium, broken by the referee drone's metallic voice. Metagross is unable to battle. Infernape wins. The crowd erupted. It was a mixture of shock, confusion, and for the first time, excitement. They had come expecting a controversy. They were getting a masterclass. Nolan grit his teeth, recalling his Metagross. The Aegis tech was supposed to give him the edge. But Ketchum, he was adapting, fighting with a ferocity and strategic brilliance that was on another level. And the woman, she was a part of it. You got lucky, Nolan snarled. But let's see how you handle this. Go, Alakazam. The bipedal psychic Pokémon appeared on the field, holding a silver spoon in each hand. Its psychic power was immense, a sharp, piercing presence. But it too was affected by the sonic emitter. Bianca could feel its frustration, its power being throttled. This one will be harder, she said to Ash. It's faster. And even with the dampener, its psychic power is more refined than Metagross's. We need someone who can counter its speed and isn't affected by psychic attacks, Ash mused, his mind sifting through his reserves. He looked at Bianca. What do you think of Sceptile? A grin touched her lips. I think he'll enjoy this. The battle that followed was a blur of motion. Sceptile versus Alakazam. Speed against speed. Leaf Blade against Psycho Cut. Nolan, growing more desperate, activated another piece of Aegis tech. A device on his belt projected a localized field around Alakazam, designed to amplify its psychic attacks and counteract the dampener. For a moment, it worked. A powerful psychic blast caught Sceptile off guard, sending him flying. Now, Alakazam. Finish it with psychic. Nolan yelled, tasting victory. The wave of power surged towards the downed Sceptile. But before it hit, Bianca's eyes glowed with a faint golden light. She wasn't attacking. She was projecting. She reached out with her own consciousness, not to block the attack, but to create a subtle psychic echo a few feet to the left of Sceptile. Alakazam, its own senses amplified and distorted by the Aegis tech, instinctively targeted the stronger psychic signature. Its attack veered at the last second, missing Sceptile and blasting a hole in the empty field. It was an opening. It was all Ash needed. Sceptile, Leaf Storm. Full power. Sceptile roared, unleashing a vortex of razor-sharp leaves. The storm engulfed the surprised Alakazam, and when it cleared, the psychic Pokémon was slumped on the ground, its spoons clattered beside it. 2-0. The stadium was roaring now, the initial tension forgotten, replaced by the raw thrill of the battle. They were witnessing why Ash Ketchum was the monarch. It wasn't just power. It was synergy. It was instinct. It was a bond with his Pokémon, and with the woman at his side, that defied explanation. Nolan was trembling with rage. He had one Pokémon left. This was his last chance. You think you're so clever, Ketchum. But you can't outthink pure power. This ends now. Go, Dragonite. The final Pokémon was a classic powerhouse. The Dragonite that appeared was large and formidable, its expression fierce. Nolan immediately activated his final piece of Aegis gear. A high-frequency pulse emanated from his belt, and Bianca cried out, stumbling as a sharp, stabbing pain shot through her head. It was a targeted psychic assault, piggybacking on the sonic frequency. Ash caught her, his arm wrapping around her waist to steady her. His face, which had been a mask of calm focus, was now dark with fury. That's enough. He looked down at Bianca. Can you do it? He asked, his voice low. She gritted her teeth against the pain, sweat beading on her forehead. She nodded, her eyes blazing with defiance. Yes. Pikachu, Ash said, his voice dangerously quiet. It's our turn. Pikachu leaped from his shoulder, landing on the field, his red cheeks sparking furiously. He looked tiny compared to the Dragonite. A Pikachu against a Dragonite? You're pathetic. Nolan screamed, his composure completely gone. Dragonite, use Hyper Beam. Erase them. The Dragonite opened its mouth, the sphere of destructive energy building. Bianca, now. Ash commanded. Bianca closed her eyes, focusing through the pain. She reached out with her mind, not towards the Dragonite, but towards Pikachu. She didn't give him power. She gave him clarity. She wrapped his mind in a protective psychic field, insulating him from the chaos of the battle, allowing him a moment of perfect focus. At the same time, she used her telekinesis, an invisible hand of force, to subtly alter the airflow around Pikachu, reducing his friction, making him lighter than air. Pikachu, 10 million volt thunderbolt, Ash said, his voice ringing across the entire stadium. It was a move they had perfected, a move that required a perfect bond, a move that channeled the power of all his friends and all his journeys into a single, devastating attack. The Dragonite's hyper beam fired, a massive torrent of destruction. Pikachu didn't dodge. Aided by Bianca's telekinesis, he leaped into the air, higher and faster than he ever could alone. A rainbow of energy swirled around him as he channeled the Z-power he still held within him. He met the hyper beam head-on. He didn't block it. He punched through it. The 10 million volt thunderbolt was not a single bolt. It was a tidal wave of multicolored lightning, a storm of absolute power that tore the hyper beam apart and slammed into the Dragonite. The resulting explosion of light and sound forced everyone in the stadium to shield their eyes. When the light faded, the Dragonite was lying in a smoking crater. Nolan was on his knees, staring in disbelief, the Aegis devices on his belt sparking and dead, overloaded by the sheer energy output. Pikachu stood in the center of the field, panting but victorious. Silence. A profound, stadium-wide silence. Then, a single person began to clap. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire stadium was on its feet, giving a thunderous, roaring ovation that was not for the Monarch, but for Ash and Bianca together. They hadn't just won a battle. They had made a statement. Ash ignored the crowd. He was kneeling by Bianca, who had sunk to the ground, exhausted but smiling. The psychic assault had stopped the moment the devices were destroyed. We did it, she breathed, relief and joy washing through her. We did it, he corrected, helping her to her feet. He kept his arm around her as he stood to face the silent, watching world. The cameras were all on him, broadcasting his image to millions. He didn't give a victory speech. He didn't gloat. He simply looked into the main camera, his gaze direct and unflinching. He held Bianca's hand, raising it slightly for all to see. Power isn't a threat, he said, his voice clear and resonant, carrying to every corner of the stadium and beyond. It's how you use it. And we choose to use ours to protect, together. It was more than a defense. It was a declaration. A mission statement. In the heart of the Indigo Plateau, under the scrutiny of the entire world, the boy from Pallet Town had just made a vow. He was not just a monarch. He was a partner. And the woman by his side was not a monster. She was his queen. In his hidden command center, Kalen watched the broadcast, his face unreadable. The crowd was cheering. The narrative was shattered. He had lost this battle. But as he shut off the display, a cold smile touched his lips. He had underestimated Ketchum's bond. But he had also confirmed the creature's power. A power that could augment others, that could manipulate the battlefield on a psychic level. It was even more dangerous than he had imagined. The political gambit had failed. It was time for a more direct approach. The game had just begun. Chapter 4, The Wedding and the Herald. The victory at the Indigo Plateau was a thunderclap that silenced the world. The Aegis Foundation's carefully constructed narrative had been dismantled, not with a counter-argument, but with an undeniable display of synergy and trust. The public, swayed by the spectacle and Ash's simple, powerful declaration, had turned on the whisper campaigns. News outlets that had questioned his fitness now ran glowing editorials about the unprecedented bond between the monarch and his mysterious partner. The Pokémon League, sensing the shift in the political winds, quietly shelved any discussion of challenging Ash's title and issued a formal apology for the misunderstanding. For Ash and Bianca, the victory was more than political. It was a liberation. They returned to Pallet town not as fugitives, but as heroes. They could walk through the town square hand in hand without eliciting whispers of fear, only looks of awe and admiration. The weight of the world's judgment had been lifted, leaving behind a space filled with a quiet, profound joy. Their lives settled into a new rhythm, a domesticity that was still a source of endless wonder for Bianca. She learned the simple joy of cooking with Delia, the intellectual thrill of debating research with Professor Oak, and the mischievous fun of playing with the young Pokémon at the lab. Ash, for his part, had never been more at peace. The hollow restlessness that had plagued him was gone, replaced by a deep-seated contentment. His training with Pikachu continued, but it was different now. It was no longer a search for purpose, but a celebration of it. Their bond, forged in secret and tested in public, deepened with every passing day. They communicated in a language that was part words, part psychic intuition. She would know he wanted a cup of coffee before he did, and he would know she was feeling the distant sadness of a lonely Pokémon in the woods and suggest a walk. It was a seamless, effortless connection, two halves of a whole finally reunited. It was on a warm evening, about a month after the battle, that the question finally surfaced. They were sitting on the old wooden swing on the hill behind his house, the same hill where he had calmed the Tyranitar. The sun was setting, painting the sky in strokes of brilliant orange and deep purple, colors that reminded Ash of the day they had first met in Alto Mare. "I've been thinking," Ash said, his voice soft in the twilight. He was pushing the swing gently with one foot, the rhythmic creak of the rope a familiar, comforting sound. Bianca leaned her head against his shoulder, her auburn hair brushing against his cheek. "About what?" She sent, her thought a gentle touch in his mind. "About us," he said aloud. "About what we are." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "The world sees us as a monarch and his partner. Our friends see us as Ash and Bianca. But I feel like, it's more than that." He looked at her, his brown eyes earnest and full of a quiet, powerful emotion. "When you revealed yourself in the forest, I wasn't scared. And when we stood on that field, I wasn't defending a Pokémon. I was defending the most important person in my life." Bianca's heart, a concept she was still getting used to, felt like it was going to beat out of her chest. She could feel the truth of his words, a wave of pure, unwavering love that was more real and solid than the ground beneath them. He took a deep breath. "I know this is unprecedented. A human and you. But I also know that what I feel is real. I love you, Bianca. Latias. All of it. All of you." He stopped the swing and turned to face her fully. "I don't want to be just your partner. I want to be your husband." The word hung in the air between them, shimmering with possibilities. Husband. A human concept, a vow of permanence, of a shared life, a shared future. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, a desire so deeply buried she had never dared to give it a name. Tears welled in her eyes, tears of pure, unadulterated joy. She didn't need to form a thought. He could feel her answer, an ecstatic, overwhelming wave of yes. That filled his mind and his soul. He smiled, a brilliant, radiant smile that outshone the setting sun. He leaned in and kissed her, a real kiss, not a dreamlike memory on a pier, but a solid, present, and deeply felt promise. It was a kiss that sealed not a victory or a goodbye, but a beginning. They decided against a grand affair. Their life was public enough. This moment was for them. The wedding was to be small and private, a ceremony held not in a church or a grand hall, but under the sprawling branches of the ancient oak tree at the top of the very same hill, a silent witness to their entire story in Pallet town. The guest list was small, consisting only of those who formed the core of their world. Delia, her eyes shining with tears of pride and happiness. Professor Oak, who looked at them with the fond, knowing smile of a man who had watched a boy grow into a king. Brock, who had flown in from his new posting at the Pewter City Pokemon Center, his usual girl-crazy demeanor replaced by a deep, brotherly affection. And Misty, the Cerulean City gym leader, who had closed her gym for a day, her fiery personality softened by a genuine, heartfelt joy for her oldest friend. Gary, to everyone's surprise, was there too, leaning against a tree at the edge of the small gathering, a rare, unsmirking smile on his face. Bianca wore a simple, elegant white dress, the same one she had worn at the Indigo Plateau. She had woven a few small, iridescent Latias feathers into her auburn hair, a subtle nod to her true self. Ash wore a simple suit, looking more uncomfortable in it than he ever had facing a hyper beam, but his eyes, locked on Bianca as she walked towards him, were filled with a reverence that took everyone's breath away. Pikachu stood beside Ash, a tiny, makeshift bow tie wrapped around his neck, looking for all the world like the proudest best man in history. Professor Oak, at Ash's request, officiated. He didn't read from a book or recite old platitudes. He spoke from the heart. "We are gathered here today," he began, his voice warm and steady, "to witness a bond that defies our known understanding of the world. A bond between two souls who have crossed the boundaries of species, of dimensions, and of legend itself. We have all seen Ash's strength in battle, but his true strength has always been his capacity to love, to connect, to see the heart within the creature. And in Bianca, he has found a heart that beats in perfect time with his own." Ash and Bianca faced each other, holding hands. They had written their own vows. Ash went first, his voice clear and strong. "Bianca, the day I met you, the real you, I was just a kid in a city of water. You showed me a world of magic and wonder I never knew existed. You saved my life. Then you were gone, and I thought you were just a memory. But you came back." He squeezed her hands. "You came back and you filled a silence in my life I didn't even know was there. You are my partner, my best friend, and my anchor. My vow to you is simple: wherever you go, I will follow. Whatever you face, we will face together. My home is your home. My heart is your heart. Always." Bianca's golden eyes shimmered. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but everyone present could feel the power of her words, a psychic resonance that made the very air hum. "Ash, for longer than you can imagine, I was alone. I watched the world from a distance, a ghost in my own home. I watched you. I watched you grow, I watched you fight, I watched you love every creature you met with a fierce and gentle heart. And I fell in love with a boy on a screen, a hero in a story. To be here now, to be real, is a miracle I never thought possible." A single, glowing tear traced a path down her cheek. "My vow is to you is this: I have known an eternity of solitude. I will spend the rest of my eternity making sure you never know a single moment of it. I choose this life. This mortal, beautiful, fleeting life. With you." They exchanged simple rings, and as Professor Oak pronounced them husband and wife, Ash drew her close and kissed her, sealing their vows. The small gathering erupted in cheers. Brock was wiping his eyes, Misty was clapping enthusiastically, and Delia was openly weeping with joy. It was a moment of pure, perfect happiness, a snapshot of peace so absolute it felt as though it could last forever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in the soft, bruised colors of twilight, the small party made its way back to the Ketchum house for a celebratory dinner. The air grew cool, and the first stars began to prick the velvet sky. Ash and Bianca lingered for a moment on the hill, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. "Mr. Ketchum," she murmured, a playful lilt in her voice. "Mrs. Ketchum," he replied, a wide, happy grin on his face. He looked at her, at the starlight reflected in her golden eyes. "I love you. I love you," she whispered back. It was in that moment of perfect, unassailable joy that the world went wrong. It did not begin with a sound. It began with a feeling. A pressure. A sudden, suffocating psychic presence that descended upon Pallet town like a lead blanket. It was not an attack, not a wave of energy that could be blocked or dodged. It was a negation. A void. The cheerful chirping of the cricket ceased. The gentle rustle of leaves in the wind died. The air grew heavy, cold, and still. Every happy emotion, the joy of the wedding, the warmth of their love, the simple peace of the evening, was instantly smothered, replaced by a profound, soul-crushing despair. It was the feeling of absolute and eternal loss. The certainty that nothing good had ever happened, or ever would again. Bianca cried out, stumbling back, her hands flying to her head. For her, it was infinitely worse. Her very being was woven from emotion, from energy, from life. This was anti-life. It was a psychic black hole, draining the meaning from everything it touched. Ash felt it too, a wave of hopelessness so intense it made his knees weak. Every failure he had ever experienced, every loss, every moment of doubt, came rushing back, amplified 1,000 times. The joy of his victory, the love for his wife, it all turned to ash in his mind, leaving only a bleak, gray emptiness. Pikachu, on the ground nearby, whimpered, his body trembling, his cheeks refusing to spark. Then, it appeared. It did not walk or fly into view. It simply coalesced. In the center of the field before them, the air darkened, not like a shadow, but like a patch of reality had been cut away, revealing a churning, starless void beneath. From this tear in the world, a figure emerged. It had a form, but it was indistinct, like a statue carved from solid shadow and deep space cold. It was vaguely draconic, but twisted, wrong. Its limbs were too long, its shape shifting and unstable. It had no face, only a smooth, blank surface from which 2 points of chilling, indifferent light burned like dying stars. This was not a Pokémon. It was a philosophical concept given terrifying form. It was an argument against existence. This was the Herald of Silence. It did not speak with a voice. Its words were not heard, but felt, injected directly into their minds like ice water into a vein. The voice was calm, rational, and utterly, horrifyingly devoid of any emotion. An interesting ritual, the Herald projected, its non-gaze fixed on Bianca. A joining. You attempt to weave a thread of divinity into the tapestry of mortality. A futile gesture. The thread will break. The tapestry will unravel. Ash, fighting against the crushing despair, forced himself to stand straight, placing himself in front of Bianca. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice strained. "What do you want?" The Herald's attention shifted to him. It felt like being assessed by a computer, a thing that saw him not as a living being, but as a collection of data. "I am the Herald. I serve the Great Silence. I want what is necessary. An end to the noise. An end to the unsustainable paradox of gods pretending to be men. An end to the chaotic fiction of love." Its focus returned to Bianca, and the psychic pressure intensified. It wasn't attacking her physically. It was deconstructing her reality. Latias of the Aeon. You have abandoned your nature. You have shackled an infinite soul to a finite vessel for a fleeting, chemical reaction in a primitive mammal's brain. You call this love. I call it a delusion. A beautiful, tragic flaw in the code of the universe. All flaws must be corrected. The herald raised a shadowy, indistinct arm. It did not point at Bianca. It pointed at Ash. And it showed her. It didn't show her a vision. It made her live it. In the space of a single, horrifying second, Bianca experienced the next 60 years of her life with Ash. She felt the joy of their shared days, the laughter, the adventures. And then she felt the slow, inevitable decline. She felt his body grow frail, his mind begin to wander. She held his hand as his breathing grew shallow, and she felt the final, gentle sigh as his life left him, leaving her alone in a quiet room, his hand cold in hers. And then it did it again. And again. 1,000 different timelines, 1,000 different deaths. Old age. Sickness. A tragic accident. A battle gone wrong. Each one was rendered with perfect, agonizing detail. Each time, she was left behind, an immortal being clutching a fading memory, the universe stretching out before her in an endless, silent, empty expanse. The grief was not a concept. It was a physical force, a tidal wave that slammed into her again and again and again, each time more devastating than the last. She screamed, a raw, ragged sound of pure agony, and collapsed to her knees, clutching her head as the herald relentlessly tortured her with the fundamental, inescapable truth of their union. Stop it! Ash roared, pure, primal rage cutting through the fog of despair. Leave her alone. He charged. Pikachu, galvanized by his partner's fury, shot forward with him, a tiny bolt of defiance in the face of cosmic apathy. Rage, the herald projected, its tone unchanged. Another form of noise. Another fleeting emotion. It, too, will pass. It made no move to defend itself. As Ash's fist flew towards its blank face, his hand passed right through it, as if it were made of cold smoke. He felt a soul-deep chill, a wave of absolute nothingness that made his arm go numb. Pikachu's thunderbolt struck it and simply, vanished, absorbed into the void without a sound or a flash. The herald turned its attention back to the weeping, broken form of Bianca. You see now. Your love is not a strength. It is a self-inflicted wound. A promise of future pain. The silence offers a release from that pain. It offers peace. The simple, elegant peace of non-existence. From a great distance, a shrill, technological shriek cut through the oppressive silence. A tiny, dragonfly-like drone, nearly invisible against the twilight sky, was hovering 1,000 feet up. Its advanced sensors, designed to detect mythical-class energy signatures, were going haywire. It couldn't see the herald, the entity had no energy signature to read, it was a lack of energy, but it registered the psychic fallout. It recorded a massive, chaotic energy spike emanating directly from Bianca, a psychic scream of unimaginable power and distress. In his command center, Kalen watched the data stream in. The readings were off the charts, chaotic and violent. He saw the Monarch charge and his attack do nothing. He saw the Pikachu's thunderbolt be swallowed whole. He did not see the herald. He only saw its effect. Sir, an analyst said, his voice tense. The Latias, its psychic output is destabilizing. Its magnitude's larger than anything we recorded at the Indigo Plateau. It's losing control. Kalen's eyes narrowed. This was it. The proof he needed. The creature's emotions were tied to its power, and now, for some unknown reason, it was having a catastrophic emotional breakdown. He had been right all along. It was a psychic nuke with a hair trigger. Back on the hill, the herald lowered its arm. The vision stopped. Bianca was left gasping on the ground, trembling, the echoes of 1,000 lifetimes of grief still tearing through her. This is a mercy, the herald projected. A warning. Unbind yourself from this fleeting anchor. Return to the quiet of your own nature. If you do not, I will return. And I will unbind you myself. All legends must end. That is the final, beautiful truth. With that, the herald dissolved. The tear in reality sealed itself. The suffocating pressure lifted. The sounds of the world, the crickets, the wind, the distant, worried shouts from the house, rushed back in, loud and jarring. Ash fell to his knees beside Bianca, pulling her into his arms. She was ice-cold and trembling uncontrollably. He could feel the psychic scar it had left on her, a deep, raw wound in her very soul. "Bianca," he whispered, his own voice shaking. "I'm here. It's gone. I'm right here." She looked up at him, her golden eyes wide with a terror he had never seen before. It wasn't fear of the Herald. It was fear of the truth it had shown her. The fear of his inevitable end. Brock and Misty were the first to reach them, their faces pale with shock. "Ash! What was that?" Brock demanded, his doctor's instincts kicking in as he saw Bianca's state. It felt like the world was ending. Ash couldn't answer. He just held his wife, rocking her gently, trying to pour his own warmth, his own life, into her. The perfect day had been shattered. The joy of their union had been poisoned. And a new, terrifying enemy had announced itself, an enemy that could not be fought, an enemy whose only weapon was a truth more devastating than any hyper beam. The wedding was over. The honeymoon had become a nightmare. And the vow they had made to each other now carried a terrible, chilling weight. They were together. But for how long? The Herald's final promise echoed in the sudden, cold silence of Ash's mind. All legends must end. Chapter 5, Monarchs on the Run. The psychic scar left by the Herald was not a wound that could be healed with a potion or a good night's sleep. It was a lingering poison in the very atmosphere of Pallet Town. For days after the wedding, a subtle, oppressive gloom clung to the place, a psychic residue of the Herald's nihilistic despair. Flowers in the garden seemed to wilt faster. Laughter felt hollow. For Bianca, it was a constant, low-grade torture. Every shadow seemed to hold the echo of the Herald's promise, every tick of the clock a countdown to the inevitable grief it had forced her to experience 1,000 times over. She grew quiet, withdrawn. She would sit by the window for hours, her golden eyes distant, and Ash would feel the faint, recurring tremors of the visions she'd been shown, a flash of him with gray hair, the feeling of a cold hand, the vast, lonely silence that followed. He tried to comfort her, to hold her and pour his own steadfast optimism into her, but it was like trying to fill a sieve. The Herald hadn't just attacked her, it had planted a seed of pure, logical dread in her soul, and it was taking root. "She's not eating," Delia said to Ash one morning, her voice fraught with worry. They stood in the hallway, watching Bianca stare blankly at a piece of toast on her plate. "She just drifts. It's like the light has gone out of her." "I know," Ash said, his jaw tight. He felt a burning, helpless anger. He could fight a champion, he could calm a god, but he didn't know how to fight a memory. That thing, it didn't just hurt her. It broke something inside her. The outside world offered no respite. Kalen and the Aegis Foundation had their proof. The massive, chaotic energy spike from Pallet Town was undeniable. They didn't need a public narrative anymore, they had a smoking gun. To the Global Security Councils and the Pokémon League, Kalen presented his case with cold, irrefutable logic. The entity known as Latias is a Class A psychic weapon of mass destruction with no safety switch, he stated in a secure, remote briefing, his voice calm and authoritative over the holographic projectors. Its emotional state is directly tied to its power output. We have now recorded a catastrophic instability event. The Monarch, Ash Ketchum, is either unwilling or unable to control it. He is no longer just harboring a risk, he is actively cultivating a global threat. The Aegis Foundation is petitioning for an emergency mandate to contain the entity, by any means necessary. The mandate was granted. The first sign that Pallet Town was no longer safe came not as a frontal assault, but as a subtle tightening of a net. Drones, sleek and silent, began to appear at the edges of the sky, too high to be easily seen. New weather stations, which were in fact sophisticated energy sensors, were erected on the hills surrounding the town. Professor Oak's internet access became unreliable, his communications intermittently jammed. Gary was their early warning system. He called on a scrambled, encrypted line, his voice urgent. "Ash, you need to get out of there. Now. It's not a political game anymore. They've greenlit a full-scale containment operation. They're boxing you in. Once the perimeter is set, they're coming for her." Ash stood in his bedroom, packing a bag with grim efficiency. A change of clothes. A pouch of high-energy rations. His full set of poke balls. His Z-Power ring and Dynamax band. Tools of a trade he had hoped to leave behind. He looked at Bianca. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her movements slow and lethargic, as if moving through deep water. The fight had gone out of her. "Bianca," he said, kneeling in front of her. He took her cold hands in his. "We have to go." "Where?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It will find me wherever I go. It knows me." She wasn't talking about Aegis. "I don't care about it," Ash said with a fierce intensity, willing her to meet his eyes. "Right now, I care about them. They're coming, and they won't listen to reason. We can't fight them here. We'd be putting everyone in town, Mom, the professor, all of them, in danger." He squeezed her hands. "I need you, Bianca. I can't do this alone. I need you to fight." For the first time in days, a flicker of the old light appeared in her eyes. The thought of protecting others, of protecting him, was the one thing that could penetrate the fog of her despair. She nodded slowly, her resolve fragile but present. "Okay." Their goodbye was brief and heartbreaking. Delia hugged them both tightly, pressing a bag of food into Ash's hands, her face a mask of brave determination. "You be safe, you too," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Don't you worry about us. You just look after each other." Professor Oak gave Ash a small, modified Pokédex. "It's running on a closed network, completely off-grid. It should be untraceable. I've loaded it with every map and geological survey I have. It might help you stay off the beaten path." With a final, sorrowful look back at the only home he'd ever known, Ash and Bianca slipped out the back of the lab's corral under the cover of a moonless night. Pikachu was on his shoulder, a silent, grim sentinel. With a whispered command from Ash, his Pidgeot descended from the sky, its form a dark shadow against the stars. They mounted the great bird and, with a powerful beat of its wings, they were airborne, rising silently into the cold night air, leaving their home and their lives behind. They were fugitives. The chase began immediately. They were barely clear of Pallet Town's airspace when the sky behind them lit up. Searchlights from Aegis ground patrols sliced through the darkness. A squadron of high-speed drones, sleek and predatory, launched in pursuit. They were waiting for us to move. Ash gritted out over the rush of the wind. "Pidgeot, full speed. Get us into the forest canopy." Pidgeot let out a sharp cry and dove, a brown and white missile plummeting towards the dark expanse of Viridian Forest. The drones followed, their engines whining. Laser grids flickered between them, an attempt to box Pidgeot in. "Bianca, I need you!" Ash yelled. Bianca, clinging to his waist, her face pale in the faint starlight, closed her eyes. The proximity to Ash, the adrenaline of the chase, it was a clarifying fire. She reached out with her mind. She couldn't stop the drones, but she could cloud their sensors. She projected a complex, multi-layered psychic illusion, a flock of 100 Pidgeot, all scattering in different directions. The drones' targeting systems went haywire. Their movements became erratic as they tried to track a dozen targets at once. The laser grid faltered. It was the opening they needed. Pidgeot folded its wings and plunged into the trees, navigating the tight spaces with breathtaking skill. They flew low and fast, the branches of ancient trees whipping past them, until Ash gave the signal to land in a small, hidden clearing. He recalled Pidgeot, the sound of the pokeball seeming deafeningly loud in the sudden silence. They were on the ground, on the run. That was amazing, Ash breathed, turning to Bianca. How did you do that? They rely on technology, she said, her breathing heavy from the effort. Technology can be fooled. The effort had cost her, but it had also focused her. The immediate, tangible threat of Aegis was easier to face than the existential dread of the Herald. This became their new reality. A desperate, high-stakes game of cat and mouse across the sprawling landscapes of Kanto and Johto. Ash, drawing on his encyclopedic knowledge of the back roads and forgotten trails from his decade of travel, became their guide. He knew which mountains had impassable ravines, which forests were too dense for ground vehicles, which rivers ran swift enough to cover their tracks. He was no longer a monarch, he was a survivalist, his instincts honed to a razor's edge. Bianca was their ghost. Her powers, once a secret, were now their greatest weapon. She could turn them invisible to pass a patrol, her sight-sharing ability allowing Ash and Pikachu to see what she saw, moving in perfect, unseen sync. She could feel the minds of the Aegis search teams from miles away, a faint, disciplined hum of thought that allowed them to stay one step ahead. She would create psychic diversions, the sound of a rampaging Ursaring in the distance, the illusion of a rockslide, to draw patrols away from their position. They were a brutally effective team. Ash was the strategist, the expert in the physical world. Bianca was the master of the unseen, the ethereal. They stole moments of rest in hidden caves, their only warmth a small, smokeless fire from Ash's Charizard, its flame carefully controlled. They ate cold rations and drank from streams, their conversations whispered. The exhaustion was immense, but in the crucible of the hunt, their bond was being reforged. The fear the Herald had instilled in Bianca was still there, but it was being pushed into the background by the immediate need to survive, to protect Ash. And for Ash, seeing her use her incredible powers not as a legend, but as his partner, his wife, filled him with a fierce pride that burned away any trace of fear. One evening, huddled in a damp cave behind a waterfall in the hills of Johto, the strain began to show. A patrol had passed dangerously close, their searchlights sweeping over the waterfall just moments after Bianca had managed to cloak them in invisibility. The near miss left them shaken. "This can't go on forever, Ash," Bianca said, her voice weary. She was staring at the cave wall, but he knew she was seeing the Herald's visions again. "We can't outrun them forever. And even if we do, he will come back. He promised." Ash was cleaning his pokeballs with a cloth, a familiar, grounding ritual. "So we stop running," he said, not looking up. "We find a place they can't follow. A place strong enough to protect us." "There is no such place," she said with a note of despair. "Aegis has technology that can track energy anywhere in the world. And the Herald, it exists outside of the world." "Not entirely," Ash countered, finally looking at her. "It found us. Which means it can be found. But first, we need a sanctuary. We need allies." He pulled out the modified Pokédex Professor Oak had given him. He brought up a detailed map of the Johto region, zooming in on a cluster of islands shrouded in perpetual storms. The Whirl Islands. Bianca's eyes widened. "Lugia," she breathed. "If anyone can shield your energy signature, it's him," Ash said, his plan taking shape. "The storms around the islands are a natural deterrent, and Lugia's own power can mask yours. They'll lose our trail. It'll buy us time. Time to think. Time to figure out how to fight something like the Herald." It was a desperate, high-risk gambit. Legendary Pokémon were not allies to be summoned at will. They were forces of nature, territorial and unpredictable. But it was the only plan they had. Getting to the Whirl Islands was a challenge in itself. They had to travel to the coast, a region heavily patrolled by Aegis naval units. They traveled by night, using a combination of Ash's Lapras to cross remote stretches of water and Bianca's invisibility to slip past coastal sensors. They finally reached the cliffs overlooking the turbulent waters that surrounded the islands. A permanent, dark vortex of clouds churned overhead, lightning flashing within its depths. The sea was a violent, churning mass of gray water. "There's no way Lapras can make it through that," Ash said, shielding his eyes from the spray. "We don't need Lapras," Bianca said. She took his hand. "Hold on tight. And trust me." She closed her eyes, and her form shimmered. In a flash of gentle light, she was Latias again, her powerful, draconic form a beacon against the gray sky. She gestured with her head for Ash and Pikachu to climb onto her back. Ash didn't hesitate. He settled himself securely between her wings, Pikachu clinging to his jacket. "Ready?" Her voice echoed in his mind. "Ready," he said, his arms wrapped around her strong neck. With a beat of her wings, they launched from the cliff edge, plunging directly into the heart of the storm. The wind was a physical blow, and the rain felt like needles. Lightning arced around them, deafeningly close. But Latias flew with an impossible grace and certainty. She wasn't fighting the storm, she was dancing with it, riding its currents, weaving through the bolts of lightning as if she could anticipate their every move. To Ash, it felt like the dream he'd had as a child, soaring through the sky on the back of a dragon, and for a moment, the thrill of it eclipsed their fear. They broke through the storm wall into the calm eye at the center of the islands. A network of rocky, wind-swept isles lay below them, pockmarked with caves. Latias banked and descended, landing softly at the mouth of the largest cavern, a chasm that plunged deep into the heart of the main island. The air inside was cool and damp, and the only sound was the drip of water and the distant roar of the sea. They were safe. For now. "We made it," Ash breathed, sliding off her back. Latias shimmered back into her human form, looking tired but relieved. "Now for the hard part," Bianca said, her voice echoing in the vast cave. She looked into the darkness. "He knows we are here." They walked deeper into the cavern, which opened into a colossal, subterranean chamber. A huge, underground lake filled the space, its water glowing with a soft, blue phosphorescence. This was Lugia's sanctum. A deep, resonant sound, more of a feeling than a noise, emanated from the depths of the lake. The water began to churn, and then, with a great surge, Lugia emerged. It was a sight of breathtaking power and majesty. Larger than any ship, its white and blue hide gleaming in the faint light, its powerful neck arched, its ancient, intelligent eyes fixed on them. But something was wrong. Its movements were agitated, its great head twitching. The fins on its back flared and retracted erratically. A powerful, booming voice filled their minds, a voice like the grinding of continents. "You trespass. This place is not for you. The balance is already broken. The song is discordant." Ash and Bianca both flinched. The psychic pressure from Lugia was immense, but more than that, they recognized the tone. The agitation. The discord. "Lugia, we mean no harm." Ash called out, his voice steady despite the psychic onslaught. "We've come seeking sanctuary. We are being hunted." "Hunted?" Lugia's voice was laced with something akin to rage-filled paranoia. "All are hunted. The silence gnaws at the edges. It eats the music. It turns the heart to stone." Bianca gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She felt it coming from Lugia, the same suffocating despair, the same hopeless emptiness she had felt on the hill. The Herald, or its influence, had been here. It hadn't come for Lugia, not directly. It had poisoned the waters, soured the song of the sea that Lugia was sworn to protect. It was driving the great guardian mad. Lugia let out a roar of frustration and pain, and a powerful torrent of water, a hydro pump, shot from its mouth, not at them, but at the cavern wall, shaking the entire island. "Leave!" It bellowed in their minds. Your presence brings only more noise. More chaos. It's no use, Ash. Bianca cried, pulling him back towards the entrance. It can't tell friend from foe. The Herald's influence, it's like a sickness. It's turned its mind against everything. They retreated from the cave as Latias thrashed in its lake, its cries of anguish echoing behind them. They had gambled everything on finding a safe harbor, and instead, they had found proof that there was nowhere left to hide. The silence was not just hunting them. It was a plague, spreading through the mythical world, turning its guardians into tormented, raging beasts. They stood on the rocky shore, the storm raging around the island's edge, trapped between a mad god and the relentless hunters who were surely closing in. The hope that had carried them this far began to crumble. What do we do now? Bianca asked, her voice trembling, the despair she had fought so hard to keep at bay returning with a vengeance. Ash stood for a long moment, staring out at the chaotic sea. He felt the weight of their situation, the seeming hopelessness of it all. They were cut off, alone, with enemies on all sides and no allies to be found. He could feel Bianca's fragile resolve beginning to shatter. But Ash Ketchum had been forged in the fires of impossible odds. He had stood at the brink of defeat more times than he could count. He reached out and took her hand, his grip firm and steady. They're hunting us because they think we're the problem, he said, his voice low and intense. Kaylin, the Aegis Foundation, they're treating the symptoms, not the disease. They're so focused on you, they can't see the real threat. A new, audacious, and incredibly dangerous idea began to form in his mind. Hiding was a losing game. Running was a losing game. Their only chance was to change the game entirely. We can't run from them, and we can't fight them, not like this, he said, turning to face her. His eyes were burning with a new fire, the look of a strategist who has just seen a path through an impossible position. So we're going to stop running. We're going to force them to listen. We're going to find their leader, this Kaylin, and we're going to show him the truth. Bianca stared at him, aghast. He'll capture me. He'll kill you. Not if we choose the time and the place, Ash said, a grim smile touching his lips. Not if we make him an offer he can't refuse. He held up the Pokédex, its screen glowing in the dim light. Professor Oak loaded this with more than just maps. It has network access points, encryption keys, everything Gary uses for his research. He looked from the device to her, his plan solidifying. We're done being the hunted. It's time we became the hunters. Chapter 6, An alliance of enemies. The storm around the Whirl Islands was a prison as much as it was a shield. With Latias driven mad by the Herald's psychic poison, Sanctuary had become a cage. For 2 days, Ash and Bianca huddled in a small, dry cave on the edge of the island, the enraged cries of the Great Guardian a constant, sorrowful backdrop. They were trapped, with the churning sea and Aegis patrols on the outside, and the tormented deity on the inside. It was in this crucible of desperation that Ash's audacious plan took shape. He worked with a feverish intensity, his hands flying across the screen of Professor Oak's modified Pokédex. It was a marvel of engineering, a device that Oak and Gary had clearly been perfecting for years. It wasn't just a data repository, it was a ghost key to the global network. Ash, guided by a series of encrypted notes Gary had preloaded, delved deep into the digital world, a place as alien to him as the distortion world. What are you doing? Bianca asked, watching him. She had regained her composure, her despair momentarily held at bay by the sheer force of Ash's focus. Fighting them on their own turf, Ash muttered, his eyes scanning lines of code. Kaylin's whole operation runs on information. He controls the narrative, he controls the data. So we're going to hijack it. It took him the better part of a day, but he found it, a backdoor into the Aegis Foundation's internal communication network. It was a high-risk move. The moment he sent a message, they would be able to trace it. He estimated he would have a window of less than 60 seconds before their elite hackers pinpointed their location. He composed the message, every word chosen with a strategist's care. It was not a plea. It was not a threat. It was a challenge. The message was addressed directly to Commander Kalen. It was a public broadcast, piggybacked onto Aegis's own secure frequency, but designed to leak onto every major news network and public channel in the world. Ash was using Kalen's own tactic against him, a public challenge that could not be refused. The message was simple. A single, static image of Ash's face, his expression grim and resolute. His voice, clear and steady, spoke over the image. Commander Kalen. My name is Ash Ketchum. For weeks, you have hunted me. You have branded my wife a threat and forced us from our home. You believe you are protecting the world from a danger you don't understand. You are wrong. You are fighting a storm, but you are aiming at the thunder. There is a greater threat, a true silence that is poisoning the heart of this world. Your technology cannot see it. Your soldiers cannot fight it. But I can show it to you. I will meet you in 48 hours. Alone. I will turn myself over to your custody at a neutral location of my choosing. The ruins of the Spear Pillar, Mount Coronet, Sinnoh region. Come alone, or send your army. It makes no difference. The truth will be there waiting for you. He hit send. The moment the message broadcast, the world stood still. News channels interrupted their programming. On the Aegis command vessel hidden in the waters off the Johto coast, alarms blared. Sir! We have an unauthorized broadcast on our primary channel, an analyst shouted. It's Ketchum. Kalen stood before the main holographic display, watching Ash's defiant face. The arrogance of it was breathtaking. To use their own network against them, to issue a public ultimatum. Triangulate his position. Now. Kalen snapped. Working, sir. The signal is heavily encrypted, bouncing off a dozen dead satellites, it's a mess. But we're getting it, somewhere in the Johto archipelago, the Whirl Islands. The analyst's face went pale. Sir, the energy readings from that location are, it's a maelstrom. Off the charts. Kalen stared at the map. The Whirl Islands. A place perpetually shrouded in storms, home to a legend. And Ketchum was broadcasting from the middle of it. A chill went down his spine. The boy was either insane or impossibly confident. It's a trap, his second-in-command, Mara, said, her face grim. He's luring you to a location of his choosing. A place of mythical significance. He will have the advantage. Of course it's a trap, Kalen said, his voice dangerously calm. But he's also right. He's made this public. If I refuse, I look like a coward who is afraid to face one man and a Pokemon. If I show up with an army, I validate his narrative that I'm a tyrant. He's left me no choice but to play his game. He turned to his command staff, his eyes cold and hard. Prepare my personal transport. I'm going to Sinnoh. And you, he said, pointing at his tactical officer, prepare a full containment team. Snipers, suppressors, nullifier units, the works. We will be in position at the Spear Pillar. We will honor the letter of his agreement. I will meet him alone. But the moment that thing shows its true power, you will take it down. Back in the cave, Ash slammed the Pokédex shut. Done. They will have traced us, Bianca said, her voice tight with anxiety. That's the point, Ash said, grabbing his pack. They know where we are. Which means they'll be coming here. So we need to be somewhere else. He looked at her, his eyes burning with an intensity that chased away her fear. Can you do it? Can you get us to Sinnoh? Flying with Latias under normal conditions was a joyous, dreamlike experience. Flying halfway across the world, while being psychically hunted by a desperate organization and an existential horror, was an exercise in pure, gut-wrenching endurance. They flew high, above the clouds, where the air was thin and cold, pushing Latias's physical form to its absolute limit. They rested for brief, shivering hours on deserted mountain peaks and in the hearts of uninhabited forests. Ash shared his rations with her human form, and they drew strength from each other's presence. They arrived at the base of Mount Coronet a full day ahead of schedule, exhausted but resolute. The mountain was a jagged, snow-capped behemoth, a great stone heart in the center of the Sinnoh region. The air was thin and cold, and a palpable aura of ancient power emanated from the peak, a feeling of time and space being stretched thin. They didn't climb the main path. Ash, using his knowledge from his past adventures in Sinnoh, led them through a series of forgotten mining tunnels and treacherous goat paths. He wanted to approach the spear pillar from an unexpected angle. He wanted to scout his own battlefield. The spear pillar was a place outside of normal reality. A vast, crumbling stone platform open to a sky that churned with cosmic colors. The ruins of great arches and columns stood like the bones of dead gods. At the center of the platform were the remnants of a great altar, a place where, long ago, Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina had been summoned, tearing a hole in the fabric of space-time. The latent energy of that event still saturated the air. It was one of the most powerful, and most unstable, locations in the world. "Why here, Ash?" Bianca whispered, her senses overwhelmed by the sheer power of the place. It felt like standing on the lip of a volcano that could erupt at any moment. "Because Kalen thinks this is about Pokemon," Ash said, his gaze sweeping the ruins, his mind mapping out every column, every piece of cover. "He thinks he's fighting me. But he's not. He's fighting the Herald." He looked at her. "You felt the Herald's presence. A coldness, a void. I'm betting it's drawn to places like this. Places where the veil between worlds is thin. Places of great power it wants to extinguish." He pointed to a crumbling archway 100 yards from the central altar. "I need you to hide there. Stay in your human form. No matter what happens, do not reveal yourself unless I call for you. This has to be between me and Kalen first." Bianca's heart clenched with fear. "He'll kill you." "He'll try," Ash said grimly. "But he's not the one I'm worried about." The hour of the meeting arrived. The wind howled across the stone platform, carrying flakes of snow. Ash stood alone at the center of the spear pillar, next to the broken altar. Pikachu was not on his shoulder, he was hidden nearby, a silent, yellow thunderbolt waiting to be unleashed. Ash's other Pokeballs were hidden in cracks in the stone around him, his team ready for a battle he hoped he wouldn't have to fight. A sleek, black Aegis transport, a VTOL aircraft that moved with unnatural silence, appeared over the edge of the mountain. It hovered for a moment before landing a respectful distance away. The ramp lowered, and a single figure emerged. Commander Kalen was exactly as he appeared on the broadcasts, tall, severe, and radiating an aura of absolute, unshakable confidence. He was dressed in a pristine black uniform, and he walked across the crumbling stone platform as if he were striding into a boardroom. He was unarmed, but Ash knew that was just for show. He stopped 30 feet from Ash. The two men stood in silence for a long moment, two monarchs of opposing ideologies, sizing each other up on a battlefield of gods. "Catch 'em," Kalen said, his voice crisp and clear, cutting through the wind. "You have a flair for the dramatic, I'll give you that. You wanted a meeting. You have it." "I wanted you to listen," Ash corrected, his voice calm and even. "Something you haven't been doing." "I have listened," Kalen retorted, his voice laced with contempt. "I have listened to the energy readings of a creature that could crack a continent with a psychic tantrum. I have listened to the panicked reports of my soldiers who saw it phase through a nullifier net. I have listened to the sound of its psychic scream echoing from your own hometown. My conclusion is the same. It is a threat that must be neutralized. She is not a threat." Ash's voice hardened, his patience fraying. "She is a person. A person you have terrorized and hunted because you are afraid of what you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Kalen said, taking a step closer. His eyes were burning with a cold fire. I understand the chaos that these legends bring. I understand it better than you can possibly imagine. His voice dropped, becoming intensely personal. I was a boy in Hoenn when it happened. I was on a ferry with my family, just off the coast of Moss Deep City. We were on vacation. He paused, the memory raw and vivid in his mind. Then the sky turned red. The sea began to boil. We saw them on the horizon. Groudon and Kyogre. Two gods having a spat. They weren't evil. They weren't trying to hurt anyone. They were just fighting. Their battle created a tidal wave. A wave the size of a mountain. It struck our ferry. I was the only survivor. He looked Ash directly in the eye, his face a mask of grief and fury. So don't you dare lecture me about what is and isn't a threat. I watched my family die in the collateral damage of a god's bad mood. My life's work, the Aegis Foundation, is dedicated to making sure that never happens to anyone ever again. These creatures are forces of nature too powerful, too unpredictable to coexist with us. Your Latias is no different. Its love for you, its fear, its anger, they are all triggers for a weapon I will not allow to be pointed at my world. Ash was stunned into silence. He finally understood. Kalen wasn't a power-hungry villain. He was a man broken by a tragedy, a man who had taken his grief and forged it into a shield, an Aegis, to protect the world. His crusade wasn't born of malice, but of a terrible, profound love for what he had lost. Kalen, Ash began, his tone softer now. I'm sorry for what happened to you. Truly. But you're wrong. Bianca isn't the cause of the problem. She's a victim of it, just like us. The thing that's making Lugia go mad, the thing that attacked us in Pallet Town, that's the real enemy. Ah yes, the greater threat, Kalen sneered, his grief recoiling back into cynicism. The boogeyman you invented to justify your recklessness. Where is it, Ketchum? I see only you, an empty stage, and the wind. Ash looked around, at the churning, colorful sky, at the ancient, energy-soaked stones. He could feel it now. A faint, subtle drop in the ambient temperature. A quiet dampening of the energy that permeated the spear pillar. It was like the first sign of a disease. It's here, Ash whispered. I was right. I goaded it here. Kalen let out a frustrated sigh. I have had enough of your games, Ketchum. My patience is at an end. Surrender the creature to me, now. Or we will take it. And we will take you. As he spoke, Ash saw them. Phantoms in the snow. The glint of a sniper scope from a high archway. The shimmer of a cloaking field near a pile of rubble. Kalen's containment team. They were all around them. You said you came alone, Ash said, his voice heavy with disappointment. I am alone, Kalen said. My soldiers are merely an insurance policy against your creatures, instability. It's not her you need to be insured against, Ash said, his gaze fixed on a point over Kalen's shoulder. The air behind Kalen began to darken. A patch of reality, 10 feet wide, was turning gray, then black. It wasn't a shadow. It was an absence. The churning colors of the sky were being erased, a hole being eaten in the world. Kalen, feeling the sudden, bone-deep chill, turned. His professional calm finally broke, his eyes widening in disbelief and a primal, gut-level fear. The Herald of Silence emerged from the tear, its form more solid here, in this place of power, than it had been in Pallet Town. It looked at the ancient, glowing ruins of the spear pillar with an air of profound distaste. So much noise, its voice echoed in all their minds, a wave of cold, clinical apathy. A nexus of creation. A monument to failed gods. It must be silenced. What is that? Kalen stammered, taking a step back. His hand instinctively went to a sidearm he wasn't wearing. That, Ash said grimly, is what I wanted to show you. Sniper team, do you have a visual on the new entity? Kalen yelled into his wrist. Negative, Commander. There's nothing there. All we see is you and Ketchum, the panicked reply came back. The Herald was psychically invisible to anyone it wasn't focused on. It was a ghost in the machine. A ghost in the world. From her hiding place, Bianca felt its presence and a wave of pure terror washed over her. She started to move, to go to Ash, but his earlier command held her in place. Trust me. The Herald's non-gaze fell upon Kalen. A man of order. You seek to contain chaos. A noble, but flawed, goal. You build walls of steel and law. But you cannot contain an idea. The only true order is the order of nothingness. Containment team, open fire on my position. Target the entity. Kalen screamed into his calm, the air filled with the whine of advanced weaponry. Beams of pure energy, designed to disrupt matter, slammed into the Herald. They passed through it without effect. A nullifier net was fired. The Herald simply dissolved into smoke, letting the net fly through it, before reforming, completely unharmed. Your weapons are based on the laws of physics, Ash explained, his voice strained as he fought against the wave of despair the Herald exuded. It doesn't obey those laws. The Herald's elite soldiers, the best in the world, were suddenly crippled by waves of pure psychic despair. Men who had faced down armies found themselves weeping, paralyzed by the sudden, certain knowledge of their own mortality and the meaninglessness of their actions. The Herald turned its attention to Ash. The anomaly. The nexus of noise. You continue to fight. You continue to hope. It is an illogical, inefficient emotion. It is time to correct you. It raised a shadowy hand, and the world went gray. It was about to unleash the same psychic torture on Ash that it had on Bianca. But as it focused its power, it made a mistake. For a single, critical instant, it became so focused on Ash that it dropped its psychic invisibility to the others. The sniper in the high archway, a woman with ice water in her veins, saw it. Her instruments were telling her nothing was there, but her own eyes saw the shifting, shadowy nightmare standing over her commander and the monarch. Her training took over. She couldn't shoot it. So she would shoot what was behind it. She fired. Her rifle wasn't loaded with a bullet, but with a high-explosive demolition charge, designed to bring down structures. Her target was the ancient, crumbling archway directly above the Herald. The charge hit, and with a great groan of tortured stone, the massive archway began to topple. The Herald, its attention fixed on Ash, reacted a fraction of a second too late. It looked up just as several tons of millennia-old stone, saturated with the power of gods, slammed down on it. The impact was titanic, shaking the entire platform. The wave of despair vanished. For a moment, there was silence. Then, from the pile of rubble, the Herald rose. But it was different. Its form was flickering, unstable. The physical impact of an object so heavily charged with mythical energy had hurt it. It had actually been injured. It looked at the rubble, then at the snipers, and finally at Ash. A new sensation entered its psychic projection, something it had never displayed before. Annoyance. Frustration. Before it could retaliate, Bianca made her move. Ash had bought her the opening. He saved you, a voice in her mind, Brock's voice, reminded her. She wouldn't let Kalen die. She shot from her hiding place, not as Latias, but as Bianca, moving with impossible speed. She reached Kalen, who was on his knees, paralyzed by the psychic backlash, just as the Herald swiped at him with a shadowy claw. She pushed him out of the way, taking the blow herself. The claw passed through her, and she screamed, but not in pain. The touch of the Herald was a touch of pure entropy. It didn't cut her, it tried to unmake her. Her form flickered violently, her human disguise threatening to dissolve into raw energy. The Herald turned its full attention to her, its original target. But as it loomed over her, a furious roar filled the air. Get away from her. Ash was there, his face a mask of pure fury. In his hand was the red chain, the artifact used to control Dialga and Palkia, which he had snatched from the broken altar. It glowed with a faint, crimson light, pulsing with residual divine power. He swung it like a whip, and the glowing chain wrapped around the Herald's arm. The Herald shrieked, a sound of pure static and rage that echoed in everyone's mind. The touch of the artifact, a thing of pure creation and control, was agonizing to its nature of chaos and unmaking. It tore its arm away, leaving a smoking, dissolving piece of the red chain behind. It looked at Ash, at the injured Bianca, at the recovering Aegis soldiers, at the rubble. It had been challenged. It had been hurt. Its simple correction had turned into a messy, complicated fight. The equation has become unbalanced, it projected, its voice strained. A new variable has been introduced. Recalculation is required. With a final, hateful pulse of cold, it dissolved into the black tear from which it had come, and the tear sealed itself, leaving behind only the howling wind and the stunned silence of those who remained. Ash rushed to Bianca's side. "Are you okay?" I think so," she breathed, her form solidifying. "It's cold. So cold." Kalen staggered to his feet, his face pale, his composure shattered. He looked at the smoking rubble, at his soldiers who were slowly coming to their senses, at Bianca, who had just saved his life. He looked at Ash, who stood over her protectively, still clutching the broken piece of the red chain. Everything he had believed, the foundational principles of his entire life, had been obliterated in the last 5 minutes. His enemy was not the creature of light who had just shielded him with her own body. His enemy was the thing of shadows that his weapons couldn't touch and his science couldn't explain. His crusade had been a fool's errand. He had been fighting the thunder. And the storm was so much bigger than he had ever imagined. Ash stood up, facing him. The animosity was gone, replaced by a weary, grim understanding. "Do you believe me now?" Ash asked. Kalen looked at the woman Ash was protecting, the woman he had hunted, the woman who had saved him. He looked at the spot where the Herald had vanished. He finally, truly understood the depth of his own ignorance. He gave a slow, shaky nod. What was that thing?" "Our enemy," Ash replied, his voice heavy. He looked down at Bianca, then back at Kalen, his expression hardening. He had proven his point. Now came the negotiation. "And you just declared war on its only living opponent. Your move, Commander." Chapter 7, The Battle for a Soul. The aftermath of the Herald's retreat was a study in silence. The howling wind of Mount Coronet seemed to hold its breath. Kalen's elite Aegis soldiers, men and women trained to face down the raw power of gods, were scattered amongst the ruins, their faces pale, their hands trembling. They were staring not at the memory of a monster, but at the reflection of their own insignificance in the face of it. They had been assaulted not by energy or force, but by a concept, a philosophical truth so bleak it had short-circuited their courage. Kalen stood amidst the wreckage of his worldview, the cold air doing nothing to stop the sweat beading on his brow. He looked at Ash, who was helping Bianca to her feet, his movements gentle, protective. He looked at the smoking rubble where the archway had fallen, the only physical evidence of the battle. He had come here to capture a monster. Instead, he had been saved by his prey and shown the face of true oblivion. "My move," Kalen repeated Ash's last words, the phrase tasting like ash in his mouth. He was a man of action, of decisive commands and clear objectives. For the first time in his adult life, he had no idea what the next move was. He drew a deep, ragged breath, the first step of a man reassembling his shattered composure. "Your wife," he said, the word feeling foreign and strange as he looked at Bianca. "She saved my life." It was a simple statement of fact, but it carried the weight of a profound confession. "She saves a lot of people," Ash said, his arm securely around Bianca's waist. "It's in her nature." Kalen walked over to the spot where the Herald had been struck down. He knelt, picking up a piece of the rubble. It was cold, colder than the surrounding snow-dusted stone, with a strange, life-draining chill that seemed to leach the warmth from his glove. He had proof. Tangible, terrifying proof. He stood up, his decision made. He was a tactician, and the board had changed. To continue his old strategy would be not just foolish, but suicidal for the entire world. He keyed his calm, his voice once again the crisp, authoritative tone of a commander. All Aegis units, stand down. I repeat, stand down. Cease all pursuit and containment operations regarding the entity Latias and the Monarch, Ash Ketchum. This is a Class Alpha directive, effective immediately. A chorus of confused but obedient acknowledgments came through his earpiece. He then looked directly at Ash. You said you could fight it. You said you could find it. How? This was the opening Ash had gambled everything to create. He stepped forward, his tone shifting from adversarial to collaborative. Not me. Us. He held up the broken piece of the red chain he still clutched. It was inert now, its power spent. This hurt it. It's an artifact of creation, of order. The Herald is a thing of unmaking, of chaos. It's vulnerable to its opposite. Bianca, her strength slowly returning, added her own insight. It's drawn to places like this, she said, her voice soft but clear. Places of power. But it's also drawn to me. To my energy. The Herald told me, it wants to correct the paradox. A divine being bound to a mortal. A new kind of team was formed on that desolate peak, an alliance born from shared terror and grim necessity. Kalen, with his global network of sensors, tactical teams, and advanced technology. Ash, with his encyclopedic knowledge of the mythical world, his unbreakable bonds with his Pokémon, and his first-hand experience with the enemy. And Bianca, who was both the target and the key, her unique psychic signature the perfect bait, her senses the only early warning system they had. Their first task was to find the Herald's nest. Kalen's science team, working with the data from Mount Coronet and the psychic residue from Pallet Town, began to build a profile of their enemy. It wasn't an energy signature they could track, it was a negative energy signature, a void print. The Herald didn't radiate energy, it consumed it. By mapping microdips in the world's ambient psychic and elemental energy fields, they could see where it had been, like tracking a predator by the cold spots it left in the jungle. The picture that emerged was terrifying. The void prints were appearing with increasing frequency all over the world, centered around places of mythic power, the Lake of Rage, the summit of Mount Silver, the Tree of Beginning. The Herald wasn't just wandering. It was systematically visiting these locations, feeding on their power, weakening the very foundations of the world's spiritual ecosystem. Lugia's madness was not an isolated incident, it was a symptom of a creeping, global sickness. It's preparing for something, Ash said, looking at the holographic map projected in the mobile command center Kalen had established in a decommissioned Sylph Company facility. It's weakening the world's defenses before it makes its final move. The goal is likely the complete severance of the mythical plane from our own, Kalen theorized, his mind now fully engaged in this new, terrifying war. To turn every legendary into a simple animal, to erase magic and myth until all that's left is a world that conforms to the rigid, predictable laws of physics. A silent world. It was Bianca who found the final piece of the puzzle. As she meditated, trying to sort through the constant, low-level static of the Herald's influence, she felt a recurring echo. A psychic address. The place the Herald always returned to. It wasn't a place on any map. It was a feeling. The feeling of a crumbling shrine, of forgotten vows, of a great hope curdling into an even greater despair. Combining her psychic geography with Kalen's void print data, they pinpointed its source. It was a pocket dimension, a fold in the fabric of reality, anchored to the physical world at a single, obscure point, a forgotten, nameless shrine deep within the Ilex forest in Johto, a place so ancient even the local historians had no record of it. That's its heart, Bianca said, her eyes distant. The heart of its power. The source of the silence. The plan was set. A full-scale, coordinated assault. It was a race against time. The Herald was growing stronger with each nexus point it consumed, and Bianca could feel its attention beginning to turn back towards her. The recalculation it had promised was almost complete. Kalen's Aegis forces would establish a perimeter around the Ilex forest, their primary goal not to attack, but to contain. They would use experimental sonic generators and energy emitters to reinforce the fabric of reality around the anchor point, making it harder for the Herald to draw power from the real world, and harder for it to escape. Ash, Bianca, and a hand-picked team of his strongest Pokémon would be the strike force. They would enter the pocket dimension and face the Herald on its home turf. It was a suicide mission, but it was the only option they had. The night before the assault, Ash found Bianca standing on the roof of the Sylph Company building, looking up at the stars. The air was cold, but she didn't seem to notice. "I can feel it getting closer," she said without turning around. "It's thinking about you. It knows you're the key to my paradox. It has decided that the most efficient way to correct me is to remove you." Ash came and stood beside her, taking her hand. It was steady. "Then it's a good thing I'm hard to remove." "Ash," she said, turning to him, her golden eyes full of a love so fierce it was almost painful. "In the battle, it's going to attack your mind. It's going to show you things. It will show you my death. It will show you your failures. It will try to fill you with the same despair it filled me with." "It can try," Ash said, his grip on her hand tightening. "But my world isn't silent, Bianca. It's filled with the voices of my friends, the roars of my Pokémon, and most of all, it's filled with you. There's no room for anything else." He leaned in and kissed her, a long, deep kiss filled with the quiet desperation of a final goodbye and the unshakable certainty of their bond. This was what they were fighting for. Not the world. Not the fate of legends. But this. This connection. This simple, profound love that defied gods and logic. The Ilex Forest Shrine was a place of deep, unsettling quiet. The air was still and heavy. Even the normally boisterous Pokémon of the forest were silent, hidden. The shrine itself was little more than a pile of moss-covered stones and a single, rotted wooden archway. At its center, the air shimmered, warped, like heat haze on a winter day. This was the gateway. Kalen stood with Ash at the edge of the clearing. His face was grim. "My teams are in position. Once you go through, we'll activate the field. It should give you some cover, but I don't know for how long." He held out a hand. "For what it's worth, Ketchum, good luck." Ash shook his hand. "You too, Commander." There was no more to be said. With a final look at the green, living world, Ash, Bianca, and Pikachu stepped through the shimmering portal. The world on the other side was a nightmare. They were standing in a twisted, negative image of the Ilex forest. The trees were gray and brittle, their leaves like ash. The sky was a churning, starless black. The ground was cracked and dry. And in the center of it all, on a floating island of dead earth, was a crumbling, gray shrine, a perfect, soulless copy of the one in the real world. This was the Herald's throne room, the heart of the silence. And the Herald was waiting for them. It stood before the shrine, its form more solid and defined than ever before. It was no longer a shifting shadow, it had a terrifying solidity, a body carved from solidified despair. Its draconic features were sharper, its faceless head now adorned with what looked like a cruel, mocking parody of a crown. It had been feeding, growing. Behind it, shadowy, indistinct figures shifted and moved, manifestations of the Herald's power, echoes of the lives and emotions it had consumed. "You have come," the Herald's voice boomed, not just in their minds, but in the dead air itself. The anomaly and its paradox. "You have come to the heart of stillness to make more noise. A fatal miscalculation. We've come to evict you." Ash roared, his voice a defiant splash of color in the gray world. He threw his arms wide. Sceptile, Infernape, Greninja, Charizard. Let's go. His four most powerful Pokémon erupted from their Pokeballs in a flash of brilliant light, their vibrant colors and powerful life auras a stark contrast to the dead landscape. They formed a protective circle around Ash and Bianca, their cries a unified chorus of challenge. The battle began without another word. It was a maelstrom of elemental fury. Charizard's flamethrower was a river of orange against the gray trees. Sceptile's leaf blade was a flash of living green. Greninja's water shurikens hissed through the air. Infernape was a blur of fiery close combat. They fought against the shadowy manifestations, which dissolved into nothingness when struck, only to reform moments later. This was a war on two fronts. While his Pokémon battled the Herald's minions, Ash and Bianca focused on the Herald itself. Pikachu, 10 million volt Thunderbolt. Ash commanded. Pikachu leaped into the air, a beacon of pure, brilliant energy. The rainbow-colored blast shot forward, a tidal wave of positive energy and raw power. The Herald simply raised a hand. A vortex of absolute blackness opened in its palm, and the entirety of the attack, a move that could level a mountain, was swallowed without a trace. Your power is meaningless here, the Herald stated. This is my domain. Here, all energy decays. All hope dies. It was then that the true assault began. The Herald's focus wasn't on their bodies. It was on their souls. It turned to Bianca. Let us continue our lesson, shall we? Instantly, she was back there. In a quiet room, holding a cold hand. The grief, fresh and raw, ripped through her. She cried out, stumbling. Bianca! Ash yelled, turning to her. And the Herald turned to him. You wish to see her death. See it from her side. Feel her eternity of loneliness after you are dust. Ash's world dissolved. He was Latias, ageless and immortal. He felt the pain of outliving everyone he had ever known. He watched Brock, Misty, his mother, Gary, all of them grow old and fade away, leaving him in an endless, silent world. He felt the weight of 1,000, 10,000 years of solitude. The despair was absolute, a crushing weight that threatened to extinguish his very soul. He was drowning. His will was faltering. His Pokémon, feeling his despair, began to slow, their attacks weakening. The shadows were closing in. But through the crushing grief, a single voice cut through. It wasn't in his head. It was real. Ash. It was Bianca. She was on her knees, tears streaming down her face, but she was fighting. She had seen this before, lived this before. She was reaching for him, not with her hand, but with her mind, with their bond. Ash, listen to me. Her psychic voice was a lifeline in the sea of despair. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a day, or a year, or 60 years. The time doesn't matter. It only matters that we have it. Now. Look at me. He forced his head up. Through the gray haze of the vision, he saw her. His Bianca. Her eyes were blazing, golden suns of pure defiance. She wasn't just enduring the grief, she was fighting it, burning it away with the sheer, incandescent power of her love for him in this moment. And something inside Ash clicked. The Herald's logic was flawless, but it was based on a flawed premise. It saw love as a transaction, an investment that had to pay off over time. It couldn't understand. Love wasn't an investment. It was a state of being. It wasn't about the future. It was about now. It doesn't matter how long we have, he roared, his voice shaking off the last vestiges of the vision. His conviction, a pure, unshakable belief in the power of the present moment, flared to life, a bonfire in the darkness. It only matters that we have it now. The Herald recoiled, not from a physical blow, but from the sheer force of his emotional clarity. This was a concept it could not compute, a variable that broke its equation. The connection between Ash and Bianca flared, a visible arc of golden-white energy. His unwavering conviction became her anchor in the sea of grief. Her profound, timeless love became his shield against despair. They were perfectly, symbiotically, protecting each other's weaknesses. Impossible, the Herald projected, a hint of what could only be described as panic in its tone. Your emotional state should be in decay. You want to talk about decay? Ash yelled, his team of Pokémon rallying behind him, their own power surging as they felt his resolve return. Let's show it what a real bond looks like. Everyone, together. What happened next was not a strategy. It was a symphony. His Pokémon didn't need individual commands. They moved as one, their hearts and minds linked to his, and through his, to Bianca's. Sceptile's Leaf Storm and Infernape's Flare Blitz combined, creating a vortex of fire and razor leaves. Charizard's Dragon Claw and Greninja's Night Slash struck in perfect sync, tearing holes in the Herald's shadowy defenses. And at the center of it all was Pikachu, a conduit for Ash and Bianca's combined will. Bianca, give him everything you've got. Ash yelled. She opened her mind completely, not just to Ash, but to Pikachu. She poured her own life energy, her eons of experience, her love, her hope, into the tiny Pokémon. Pikachu's body began to glow, not with electricity, but with the same golden-white light that now connected Ash and Bianca. The Herald saw the threat. It lunged, its shadowy form coalescing into a sharp, obsidian spear aimed directly at Ash's heart. It never made it. Pikachu, empowered by a force beyond understanding, fired. It wasn't a thunderbolt. It wasn't a Z-move. It was a pure, focused beam of emotional energy. A beam of concentrated now. A beam of pure, defiant love. The beam struck the Herald dead center. There was no explosion. There was an implosion. The Herald did not scream. It simply ceased. Its nihilistic philosophy, its entire reason for being, was overwhelmed and erased by a power it could not comprehend. It was like showing the color red to a creature that could only see in black and white. Its mind, its very essence, shattered. The moment the Herald was gone, the pocket dimension began to collapse. The gray ground cracked, the dead trees dissolved into dust, and the black sky fractured, revealing a blinding white void beyond. Kalen, pull us out. Ash roared into the open air, hoping the calm link in his Pokédex was still active. The world dissolved into white. They were falling through a void of nothingness. Ash held on to Bianca, who held on to Pikachu, a tiny chain of life in the midst of annihilation. Then, they felt a pull. A violent, wrenching sensation, as if they were being dragged through a keyhole. There was a deafening roar of sound, a blinding flash of green light, and then they were tumbling out of the shimmering portal, landing in a heap on the soft moss of the ilex forest. They were back. The air was cool and smelled of life. The forest was alive with sound. Kalen and his soldiers were there, their faces a mixture of awe and terror. The battle was over. They had won. Ash, panting, looked at Bianca. She was drained, exhausted, but she was smiling, her golden eyes brighter than he had ever seen them. He was alive. She was alive. They were together. In the now. And for the first time, the future felt not like a threat, but like a promise. Chapter 8, The Monarch and His Queen. The silence that followed the collapse of the Herald's dimension was a different kind of quiet. It was not the oppressive, soul-crushing void of the Herald, nor the tense, waiting silence of a world on the brink of war. It was the quiet of a fever that had finally broken, the calm that follows a hurricane. In the heart of the ilex forest, surrounded by the humming machinery and stunned soldiers of the Aegis Foundation, the world took its first clean breath in months. Ash lay on the soft moss, his arms still protectively around Bianca, the adrenaline of the battle draining away to leave a bone-deep exhaustion in its place. His Pokémon, recalled to their Pokeballs to rest, were silent, but he could feel their shared sense of victory, a low, triumphant hum in the back of his mind. He had faced down a philosophical void and punched it in the face with the power of love and teamwork. It was, he thought with a wry, weary smile, the most Ash Ketchum solution imaginable. Kalen was the first to approach, his movements slow, cautious, as if he were approaching a miracle. He knelt, not as a commander assessing his assets, but as a man witnessing something far beyond his comprehension. His eyes weren't on Ash, but on Bianca, who was slowly sitting up, her face pale but serene. "Is it over?" Kalen asked, his voice hushed. "The Herald is gone," Bianca confirmed, her own voice sounding clearer, lighter than it had in weeks. The psychic static that had been a constant background noise in her mind was gone. The world was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet, a clean slate. "The silence is broken." Kalen looked at the shimmering, now stable portal to the dead dimension, which was slowly shrinking, closing like a healing wound. "We owe you a debt we can never repay." He finally looked at Ash, a new, profound respect in his eyes. "Both of you." The journey back from the brink was slow. The world didn't learn the full story of the Herald of Silence. The official report, carefully crafted by Kalen and approved by Ash, spoke of a previously unknown, hostile extradimensional entity that had been neutralized by a joint operation between the Aegis Foundation and the World Monarch. The details were classified under global security protocols. It was a story that was both true and a massive understatement. The world wasn't ready to hear that it had been saved from philosophical annihilation by a trainer, his electric mouse, and his legendary Pokémon wife. The real change happened not in the headlines, but in the shadows. The Aegis Foundation, under Kalen's reformed leadership, underwent a seismic shift in purpose. Their mission was no longer containment. It was balance. Their vast network of sensors, once used to hunt, was repurposed to monitor the health of the world's mythic ecosystems. Their elite soldiers were retrained, their focus shifting from suppression to protection and support. Kalen, the man who had lost his family to a battle between gods, now dedicated his life to ensuring those gods had a safe and stable world to protect, becoming an unlikely and fiercely dedicated steward of the very forces he had once sought to control. His first act was to personally travel to the Whirl Islands and, using a combination of his technology and a team of Aura Guardians Ash had recommended, help soothe Lugia's tormented mind, beginning the slow process of healing the discord the Herald had sown. For Ash and Bianca, the return to Pallet Town was a true homecoming. The gloom that had clung to the town was gone, replaced by the familiar, comfortable warmth of home. Delia hugged them so tightly Ash thought his ribs might crack, her tears this time ones of pure, unadulterated relief. Professor Oak peppered them with 1,000 questions, his scientific curiosity warring with his grandfatherly concern, before finally just clapping Ash on the shoulder and telling him he was proud of the man he'd become. Life settled into a new, beautiful normal. The title of World Monarch, which had once felt like a hollow crown, now had a new weight, a new meaning. Ash wasn't just the strongest trainer. He was an ambassador. A bridge. He found himself attending not tournaments, but global summits, sitting at tables with world leaders and, through Bianca's silent telepathic translations, with delegations of psychic Pokémon who had never before had a voice in the human world. He spoke with an authority that no one could question, the authority of a man who had walked in two worlds and fought for the soul of both. Bianca, in turn, found her own purpose. She was no longer just Ash's wife, a mysterious companion. She was a teacher. She spent her days at Professor Oak's lab, but not as a subject of study. She worked with young trainers, using her empathy to help them understand the feelings of their Pokémon, to foster deeper bonds based on communication rather than just commands. She could explain why a Charmander was feeling anxious, or why a Squirtle was acting out, in a way no one else could. She was teaching a new generation not just how to battle, but how to listen. The trainers who came from Pallet Town began to be known for their unusually deep and synergistic bonds with their Pokémon, a testament to the quiet, smiling woman with the golden eyes who helped them understand the heart of their partners. Their life together was a tapestry woven from the grand and the mundane. There were days of intense political negotiation, where Ash would have to mediate a territorial dispute between a city council and a clan of territorial Onyx, with Bianca providing him with the Onyx clan's perspective in real time. And there were days of simple domesticity, where the greatest challenge was deciding what to have for dinner, or who was going to fix the leaky faucet. One crisp autumn afternoon, a year after the battle with the Herald, Ash and Bianca were sitting on the porch swing, the same one where he had proposed. The air was filled with the scent of fallen leaves and the distant shouts of children playing. Pikachu was dozing in a patch of sun on the porch railing, his tail twitching as he dreamed. "It's quiet," Bianca said, her thought a soft touch in his mind. It was the same thing she had said their first night together after the wedding, but the meaning had changed entirely. It was no longer a prelude to fear, but an expression of peace. "It's home," he replied, slipping his arm around her. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the world go by. A young boy, no older than 10, came running up the path to their house, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and determination. He was clutching a well-worn pokeball. He skidded to a halt in front of the porch, looking up at Ash as if he were looking at the sun. You're him," the boy stammered. "You're Ash Ketchum. The World Monarch." Ash smiled, a warm, easy expression. "That's me. What can I do for you?" The boy took a deep breath, puffing out his chest. "I challenge you to a battle." Bianca chuckled softly. Ash stood up, stretching. He looked at the boy, at the fire in his eyes, the same fire he had had at that age. He saw the future of Pokémon training, standing right there on his lawn. "I'm a little busy right now," Ash said, his expression turning serious. "But my friend here might have some time." He gestured to Pikachu, who had woken up and was now looking down at the boy with a curious glint in his eye. The boy's face fell for a second, then lit up again. "A battle with the Monarchs, Pikachu? That was a story for a lifetime." "Okay." Ash watched as the boy and Pikachu faced off in the yard, the boy sending out a small, eager Rattata. He didn't give Pikachu any commands. He just watched, a fond smile on his face. Bianca came and stood beside him, slipping her hand into his. "You've changed," she said softly. "How so?" he asked, his eyes still on the mock battle. "The old Ash would have accepted that challenge in a heartbeat," she teased. "The old Ash had something to prove," he replied, turning to look at her. He squeezed her hand. "I've got nothing left to prove. I have everything I need right here." She could feel the truth of his words, a wave of pure contentment that washed over her. She had once feared the passage of time, the inevitable end that the Herald had shown her. But Ash had taught her a different truth. Time was not a threat. It was a gift. Every day, every hour, every moment was a precious, unrepeatable treasure. The battle in the yard ended, Pikachu having playfully dodged the Rattata's attacks before giving it a gentle, non-damaging thundershock that left its fur standing on end. The boy, thrilled and defeated, recalled his Pokémon and bowed deeply. "Thank you for the battle," he shouted, before turning and running back towards town, already rehearsing the story he would tell his friends. Ash and Bianca stood on the porch, watching him go. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the green hills of Pallet town. The world was peaceful. Safe. "So, what's next?" Bianca asked, her voice a quiet murmur. "Another world to save? Another ancient evil to vanquish?" Ash laughed, a deep, genuine sound. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. He looked at the setting sun, at the familiar shape of Professor Oak's lab, at the path leading off towards adventures unknown. He had reached the summit, and he had found that the journey didn't end there. It was just the beginning of a new one. "I don't know," he said, his voice full of a happy, contented certainty. "But whatever it is, we'll face it together." He was Ash Ketchum, the boy from Pallet Town. He was the World Monarch, a bridge between two worlds. He was a husband, a partner, a protector. And beside him stood his queen, a being of myth and magic who had chosen a mortal life for love. Their reign, a reign of balance, understanding, and an unbreakable bond, was just beginning. The greatest adventure was no longer about becoming the very best. It was about building a life, together, in the quiet, beautiful peace they had fought so hard to win. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.